Michael Pederson, thank you so much for coming and being with us today. And I'm so excited to hear what you have to say about Ben Bauer.
Well, I appreciate being asked. So let me see here. Let's make sure we can share the screen. Let's do this here. There, and there it is. And if I do this, go to slideshow. Can you tell me, is it up?
Up and looks good.
Everybody's
looks good.
Good. All right, I'm going to just kind of hide those some. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Petterson. I am the Shure historian. I started at Shure in 1976, and so it's coming up on my 45th year there. I didn't start out as a historian. I've had 5 different careers there, but I got interested in the history of Shure and like to share it with other people. So today, we're going to explore the lost lab notebooks of Ben Bauer. We're going to learn about Ben, but we're also going to talk about these lab notebooks that we found only recently. So Ben's most recognizable invention, probably the most recognizable Shure microphone ever, is the Unidyne here. The first cardioid microphone with a single dynamic element. This is an ad from 1952 that we put out, and it was actually so well known there. The Shure name doesn't even appear on that, so the aspect was the microphone that needs no name. It was introduced in April 1939, and it's still being sold in 2021, 82 years after its debut. In fact, this microphone has never been out of production in 82 years. Hang on just one second. This seems like it's jumped ahead here. No, hang on. No. Excuse me just for a second. Okay, we're fine. All right, here we go. In January 2014, Shure was awarded a IEEE Milestone Award for the Unidyne. Now, if you're not familiar with the Milestone Awards, these are given out by IEEE to ideas and people and things which change the world of electronics and communications. So here's the IEEE Milestone Award that we got for the Unidyne. But to really appreciate this, let me show you the other milestone awards that they gave out for the decade of 1930 to 39. By the way, they give these out by decades, so the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. These are the other milestone awards for the 30s: development of ferrites, stereo sound reproduction, which went to Blumline, by the way, breaking of the Enigma code, something pretty cool. And it's Claude Shannon's development of information theory. This group is probably savvy to it, but Claude Shannon was the guy that first figured out that all data could be a 0 or a 1. And he was working for Bell Labs at the time. And the single element unidirectional microphone. So for us to get one of these milestone awards and have these other things as neighbors is quite an honor for us. So Ben invented the uniphase principle, which is the uniphase principle that's the acoustical network inside the Unidyne that makes it directional. And he did this when he was just 24 years old, which is just astonishing to me. There he is, Ben Bauer. He was born as Ben Baumswager. We'll talk about that in just a second. And here he is in 1945 at Shure Brothers in Chicago. He came to Shure in 1936 as a co-op student, and 10 years later, he was the vice president of engineering. This was one bright guy.
So how old was he in that photo?
Here he's, let's see, he would be 32? Yeah, 32. But it took him 17 years to get to the United States and began in the Ukraine. I'd love to tell a story because it's just an astonishing story. So he was born in Odessa, Ukraine, 1913. At the time, there was a war going on. It was a civil war between the White Russians and the Red Russians. Odessa was not a very safe place to be. His mother was a concert pianist and teacher. His father was some type of engineer. I'm not sure exactly the type, but it wasn't safe. And they decided to get the family out. So when he was age 10, they moved to Warsaw, Poland, to get away from the civil war in Russia and Ukraine. And they found when they went to Warsaw that it was a little bit better, but there was a lot of anti-Semitism there, so the family wasn't quite comfortable there. At age 12, the family moves to London, and then, of all places, they go to Havana, Cuba. This is an interesting thing. At the time, the United States had an immigration quota, particularly for European Jews in the 20s, And while the Jews that were coming over were waiting to get into the United States, they settled in Havana. And at the time, Havana had this very big, large expat community of European Jews waiting to get into the United States. So Ben's only 12 years old, and he's already lived in 4 countries. At age 17, he decides that he's interested in electronics, and he goes to New York because he has some relatives there. And he attends the New York Electrical School and then the Pratt Institute. And by the way, at the same time, teaches himself English because he has to know English to go to college there. Age 19, he gets a 2-year degree from Pratt. He goes back to Havana. And for 2 years, he works at the Girault Radio Company as a radio service engineer. Girault was in Havana, and they were doing two-way radios for police, fire, transportation, etc. He decides at age 21 to go to the University of Cincinnati. Why? Couple reasons. Number one, relatives are there. Number two, they actually had a College of Electrical Engineering, which was a little bit unusual at that time. And number three, they had a co-op program where you could work for a certain amount of weeks and go to school, and that would help him pay for school. So this is how he gets to Cincinnati at age 21. Here's where luck comes into it. It's 1935, Depression. Mr. Shure was founded in 1925, so now it's 10 years old. And Mr. Shure decides, geez, I wonder if we can get some inexpensive college labor, particularly in the engineering. Our chief engineer at the time was a guy named Ralph Glover. And fortunately, Ralph had graduated from the University of Cincinnati. And he sends a letter to one of his ex-professors, Professor Addison, saying, you know, is there anybody down there that's kind of bright about, we want to hire up as a student, either a grad student or an undergrad student. And Mr. Addison writes back and says, well, you know, there's this junior that's a really amazing guy named Benjamin Bauer. He's got an excellent record, and he's heading the class, and we think he might be a great person to work for Shure as a co-op student. And that's how we found Ben Bauer. You talk about the entire future of a company just hanging by a thread. Here it is. So at age 23, 1936, Ben starts working for Shure as a co-op student. He does 8 weeks at Shure, 8 weeks at school, 8 weeks at Shure, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So he can finish up his degree and also work at Shure. And he gets the grand salary of $15 per week. Age 24, 1937, he graduates, and Mr. Shure says, man, this guy's really bright. I'm going to hire him. So he's hired by Shure as a development engineer at $25 a week. You know, if you're making 15, now you're making 25. That's a nice increase. So there's Ben Bauer, age 24, sitting on the left. There's Mr. Shure here, age 35. Mr. Shure always looked old. By the way, he didn't change, by the way. 40 years later, he looked exactly the same. But this is Ben Bauer, and this is actually a guy named Jack Berman. He was our head of marketing, and this is Maurice Cope. He was our head of manufacturing. But this is 1937 at 225 West Huron in Chicago. So development engineers are required to keep lab notebooks. We still have to do that because we document ideas and concepts that could be patentable. But the lab notebooks for when Ben worked at Shure in the 30s and 40s were not there. I don't know if they were lost, stolen, whatever, but I was looking for them. This is around 2014, 2015. Nobody knew where they were at. I work in the archives all the time, and we had other documents from Bauer, early work, including things like this. Here's a 1938 white paper he wrote about further work on the unidirectional dynamic microphone. We had a copy of that. This is the side view of the dynamic element. We had his first and second prototypes. We'll talk about those a little later. We had his third and fourth prototypes. By the way, this is one that looks really unusual. This was an electromagnet. He wanted to be able to easily vary the magnetic strength to see what would work best, and that's why this is so unusual. And also this one, the diaphragm and the voice coil are missing. We had his fifth and his sixth prototypes. This one looks very much like what's inside of a Unidyne 1 microphone. We had the Unidyne painted wood prototype from 1938. I didn't even know this existed. When Shure moved from Evanston that we had been in Evanston since 1956 to our Niles headquarters in 2004. We were looking in every nook and cranny we could find in Evanston before we moved. Someone crawled underneath the anechoic chamber in Evanston and brought out this old box. And there were a bunch of older boxes in there. And one of the boxes said on the side, Ben's Mic 1938. And we opened it up, and that prototype was inside of it. So that was what it was going to look like originally. We have a first production Unidyne 1 element from 1939. That's actually what's in the Unidyne there itself. We have a first production die casting of the Model 55. This is what, and you can see it's in great shape, no pitting or anything on that. And we have a 1937 Oldsmobile photo that looks a lot like a Unidyne. By the way, just recently, within the last 3 months, I found one of these grills and bought it. And we now have a display at Shure, which is that grill with a Unidyne 1 mounted on top of it, which is pretty cool. So, this is 2 years before the Unidyne came out. We think it's pretty likely that this was the inspiration for how it looked. Also, maybe no coincidence, Mr. Shure drove Oldsmobiles. He might have went out into the parking lot one day, looked at the front of the car and said, man, that's what our microphone should look like. We don't really know, but take a look at that. Pretty hard to say it doesn't look like exactly like the Unidyne.
Michael, do you know who the design engineer for Oldsmobile was?
I do not for Oldsmobile. I do know who the design engineer was for sure. And actually he was an outside guy. His name was Wesley Scherer, but I do not know who the design engineer for the Oldsmobile was. But boy, doesn't that look just like it? Same amount of horizontal ribs, same vertical ribs, the whole routine.
Totally.
Yep. We also have his patent, Ben Bauer's patent from 1941, probably the most important patent in Shure's history, called Conversion of Wave Motion into Electrical Energy. Boy, you talk about a broad patent. This is not about microphones. This is about anything that takes waves and turns into electrical energies. And here's a photo, one of the first pages of it. There's actually 3 pages of diagrams. One shows a dynamic mic, one shows a crystal mic, and one shows a ribbon microphone, all using the uniphase principle inside.
Are you guys going to get into ocean generation of electricity from ocean waves?
This
would cover it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but the patent's expired. Oh. So we also had Bauer's first ASA paper. He eventually became the president of the Acoustical Society of America, but here's his first paper from July 1941, Uniphase Unidirectional Microphone. But lab notebooks 1 and 2 were missing. September 2016, 60 years after Bauer left Shure, we found the lab notebooks in offsite storage. Now, myself and Julie Snyder, who is our archivist, we were sent out there to start investigating 500 bankers' boxes, which are they're still off-site, which we hadn't looked in decades. And our financial people were saying, why are we paying to store these things? Is there anything useful out there? So pre-COVID, obviously this is 2016, way pre-COVID, Julie and I went out there and we took 8 boxes randomly off the shelf, nothing written on them. And the second box we looked in had the lab notebooks. And this is a picture of me that very day when we found the lab notebooks. So let's take a look inside them. Here's the inside front cover, dated September 4th, 1936. Baumschweiger is still a co-op student. By the way, let's talk about she's changing his name to Bauer. So in 1941, Shure started to get military contracts to build headphones, earphones, and microphones for the military. This was before World War II, but everybody knew it was coming. Every time military folks would come to Shure and Mr. Shure would announce them to introduce them around, they say, Baumschweiger, is that a German name? And they would have to go through this every time. So basically Ben decided it was going to be a lot easier for his career if he would just take the first 3 letters of his name and the last 2 letters and turn it to that. So that's how it went from Baumschweiger to Bauer. In this sign at the bottom is Ralph Glover. He was the guy that hired Ben, and eventually Glover left Shure to go to work for Jensen Loudspeakers, and Bauer took his job. So here's his very first day on the job, as again, co-op student. I love this note at the top. All entries, ideas, suggestions, etc. are author's original unless specific credit is given. Ben Bauer. I think he knew he was a genius. By the way, also, just look at that English. This is his fifth language. And he's only been speaking English now for about, let's see, 1936, okay, for about 10 years, maybe, not even that. And it's just perfect English. Everything is perfect. I know his sons, and when I asked his sons about that, I said, your dad spoke 5 languages. His English is perfect. And one of his sons says, yeah, Dad was kind of smart. Yeah, that's for certain. So here it is, heartbeat microphone. That's his first assignment. And at the bottom of this, where he's talking about close talking microphone, here's his first day. He says to his boss, introducing acoustic resistance in front of the instrument is not quite correct. So it's his very first day, and he's already telling Ralph Glover, no, that's not how it works. Here's 1937, May 27th. He started doing the math for a cosine microphone in a cardioid microphone, and this is fundamental research that led up to the uniphase principle. When I got to this page here, my heart stopped because I recognized this electrical equivalent drawing here as the acoustical network of uniphase. And this is the very first day that he wrote down the concept that led to the uniphase principle. I love this quote up on top here. The following arrangement seems to offer possibilities. Yes, it only changed the microphones for the rest of time. He did think of this as a crystal microphone. He wasn't working on a dynamic microphone first, so that's why it says single crystal cardioid element. But that there, take a look at that because you're going to see that come back a few times. This is a few months later. Now he's thinking about, maybe a moving coil microphone is a preferred choice. And at the bottom it says, this appears that the coil construction will be more advantageous. So he's moving away from the idea of a crystal microphone, thinking that a moving coil is going to work better. The notebooks answered why these prototypes, number 1 and 2, do not exhibit a magnetic field. One of the first things I did when I found the prototypes was I took a paper clip and I held them up to each of them. You could feel the paper clip grabbing, the magnet grabbing the paper clip, so forth. I get the prototype number 3, that was the one with the electromagnet. Of course, it didn't have any, wasn't powered up, so there was no magnetic field. But 1 and 2 did not have a magnetic field, and this kind of puzzled me. Well, the notebook answered that. Here's how he did it. He took a horseshoe magnet and he stuck it to the bottom of it. And that's how he powered it up. Magnets were expensive back then. He necessarily didn't want to waste them, so he powered up the first prototype by sticking a horseshoe magnet on it, and he powered up the second prototype by sticking a horseshoe magnet on it. Simple as that. By the way, none of us could figure this out, but once he saw the drawing, it's like, oh gosh, this makes all kinds of sense. January 29th, 1938, this is the first mention of 150 ohms standard, which is now, worldwide, that's what the low impedance microphone is. I'm not saying he invented this, but this is the first thing I can find of his notebook saying, 150 ohm resistance seems to work really well. This is additional work on the unidirectional dynamic microphone. He starts using the term D. D is what's the distance between the diaphragm front and the diaphragm rear. And this is the first time in his notebook that he uses this concept. Also, he mentions Hugh Knowles. Some of you may know the name Hugh Knowles because he founded Knowles Electronics, certainly one of the largest manufacturers of hearing aid microphones in the world. At the time, Hugh worked for Shure in the 1930s and 1940s looking into patents. So he was our patent guy. And here is a drawing of the unidirectional dynamic cartridge. You can see the diaphragm here, which is aluminum. You can see the gap here in the magnet gap and the voice coil windings. So this is really starting to take final form as far as a unidirectional dynamic cardioid microphone. He files a patent September 28th, 1938 of conversion of wave motion into electrical energy. I showed you that already. This is the elaboration of that idea. But he wasn't working simply on that. He was working other ideas too. Here are early calculations for a controlled reluctance microphone, also known as a controlled magnetic microphone. That's where the voice coil moves a lever, and the lever disturbs a magnetic field. So the coil is stationary, the magnet is stationary, and you simply have a ferrous armature which disturbs that. So they're called controlled reluctance, controlled magnetic. They're used for balanced armature is another term used for earphones now as well. This type of mic was very durable, and it played a very critical role in communication microphones for World War II. So Bauer's working on that. Here's the first time he uses super directional microphone. We all use the term supercardioid now. This is the earliest thing I've been able to find where they used super to mean a microphone that's a tighter pattern than a cardioid. This is 1938. And here he gets into laying out the principles of a beam type highly directional microphone. So the idea of taking multiple elements, having them at different distances, and making a beam type microphone. So it took Shure only 78 years to introduce our steerable microphone ceiling arrays, and it uses much of the same math that Bauer laid out in 1938. When I found this, I immediately ran to the mic lab and said, hey, how come it took you guys 78 years to figure out how to do an array microphone? And here's Bauer drawing out the beam type highly directional microphone patterns. He only drew half the pattern because it was obvious that the other half would be exactly the same. So I love this idea of the ancients keep stealing our modern inventions. Indeed the case with Ben Bauer. How much material is in the books? About 300 pages in book number 1, 295 pages in book number 2. And both the books now are indexed, scanned, and currently locked up in my office at Shure. So what happened to Ben Bauer? He worked for Shure for 20 years, rose to the vice president of engineering, and after that he left Shure to join CBS Labs in New York. Actually, their offices were up in Connecticut. And while he was at Shure, Shure and CBS worked in secret to develop the M3D stereo cartridge that would play the new CBS stereo long playing records. And because of this working between Shure and CBS, that's how CBS found out about this genius Ben Bauer. And William S. Paley, who owned CBS, recruited Bauer, and Bauer left Shure to head up the audio and acoustical research at CBS. Why did he leave it? Well, I talked to his kids. Bauer loved working at Shure, but he became a vice president. And at the vice president level, he wasn't doing research anymore. He was defending patents. He was hiring and firing people, and he got too far away from what he wanted to do. Paley said, you come to work at me at CBS, and all you get to do is research. And that was just too good of an offer to pass up. So he worked for another 20 years at CBS. He reached the age 65, which was mandatory retirement at CBS for everybody except Paley. And when he retired, he had over 100 patents to his name. Sadly, less than a year later, he died of a heart attack on March 31st, 1939. So I asked his sons, I said, what was Ben most proud about? Which microphone was it? Which headphones? And it wasn't any of those. From World War II until his death, he did a lot of research for the military, and much of it is still classified. And Bauer felt his greatest accomplishment was his work on the sonobuoys. Sonobuoys are devices that get dropped into the ocean. They track submarines underneath, and then they radar the submarine position to aircraft overhead. He felt the work he did there helped win the war during World War II, but also stop the Cold and save us from destroying ourselves during the Cold War. So Ben said that was the most amazing work he did, the most work he was most proud of the sonobuoys. So the uniphase development work done in the 30s is still employed in most directional microphones worldwide. Our patents ran out long ago, but if you look at almost any directional microphone in the world, not all of them, but most of them use some form of the uniphase acoustical network. So to end up this thing, we're not going to look at John Cleese. I just happen to have like this photo, but I'd like to show you some rare photos of Unidyne microphones that we've got, and then we can open up the questions or show and tell, whatever you want. Here's a Unidyne 1 from 1939. This is a model 55. Here's the Shure logo that we created in 1936. We still use that logo today. These are sound waves on the left. Here is a voice coil on the right, and here is a sine wave or a Shure S, however you want it. If you rotate this 180 degrees, it becomes an earphone. So it could be a microphone going this way or an earphone going that way. There's a 556 Unidyne 1. The primary difference there is you have a shock mount, vibration mount at the bottom of that. This is from 1947. Here's a Unidyne 1 from 556 that survived a fire in Longview, Texas. They were so impressed with it, they sent us back the microphone and a story about it. We made an ad on it. This microphone is still in the archives, kept in a special case because it still smells of smoke, but it is operational. There's a Unidyne 2 from 1951. That's the smaller version. By the way, that's what S stands for, small, 55S. And this came out in a blue screen color with blue logo. I happen to really like that blue. There were also red ones. There were black ones. There's a lot of variations on this. We can talk later about why the different colors, and it's a very practical reason why we use different colors. There's a comparison of size. The Unidyne 2 is about 66% the size of the Unidyne 1. It was brought out because television was getting popular in the early 50s, and television guys said, hey, that Unidyne 1's too large, hides too much of the face, make a smaller version of it. And that's why we made the smaller version Unidyne 2, which is the size we still make in 2021. There's the insides, Unidyne 2 left, Unidyne 1 on the right. You can see kind of differences. Still has the transformer, still has the same size aluminum voice coil. They just shrunk it down. And the magnets has gotten better as well, so they could make the magnets a little bit smaller and still have the same strength. Here's a 55 SW from 1961. S is for small, you already knew that, and W is for switch. We could have made it SSW, that was too confusing. So if it says a W, it just means it has an on-off switch on it. We got into blingy microphones. 1967, we made it in gold. We made a PE version. That was a professional entertainer version. That came wired high impedance with a cable that ended up in a 1/4-inch phone plug, so you could plug it into your guitar amp, because we didn't have PA systems back then. All of us guys who had rock and roll bands plugged their mics into our guitar amps. Here's a Unidyne 2 55S Series 2 from 1989. Basically, what we did was we simplified the inside of it. So here is a much more simplified version of it, based very similarly. It looks very similar to a Unidyne 3 SM58 capsule. Not exactly the same, but a cousin of it. We brought out the Super 55, which is based on a Beta 58 with the blue screen on it in 2019. We used the blue because that was the first color we used in 1951. There's the inside of the Super 55 interior view. Again, that looks very much like the insides of a Beta 58. Again, not exactly the same, very close cousin to it. A black and red version of it. These are limited edition. I still think Metallica has got these, and they use them for their concerts. In 2014, we brought out a large size. We went back and recreated the entire thing, and we made 5,575 of these. That's because it's Model 55 75th anniversary. Isn't that clever? And these are limited edition, and they've been gone for quite a while.
Michael, did you have the the molds?
No, we had to go back and recreate all that stuff from scratch.
Wow.
One of this amazing model maker we have at Shure named Mike May, who's just a crotchety guy, but he is just astonishing. He basically took one out of the archives and just did it all from scratch. So yes, we had to recreate all those molds. And we had a pitch black.
Compatible with the old ones.
What's that? Yeah,
I don't suppose the new metal parts are compatible with the old ones.
No, there are a lot of. I don't think so. I've not tried that. It's an interesting thought, though. But they are the same size. But I don't know. You know, there are a lot of changes over the years.
Just wondering, because I've got 2 of the old ones with broken front grills.
Yeah. Well, if you can find one of these things, these things here, they're all sold out, and they go for $600 or $700 on eBay. So probably not worth looking into that.
I don't suppose you stock parts.
No, not for that. No. Once they're gone, they're
Michael?
gone. Yeah.
Are the innards of that anniversary model the same, or are they more like a modern one?
They're more like a 58. More like a 58. We did a pitch black version in 2017, and there are going to be future versions in the well. You know, this is I'll talk about this. This is a trademark. I'll talk about that in just a second. And then tattoos. Sometime when you're really bored, go to Google Images and simply type in microphone tattoo, and you will find page after page after page of Unidynes tattooed on people's bodies. I was at an ADAS show now about 10 years ago, and a guy came up to me and said, "Hey, I got a Unidyne tattoo. You want to see it?" I'm being polite. Sure, why not? So he rolls up his right sleeve on his shirt, and there's a Unidyne. And then he rolls up his left sleeve, and on his left bicep, he has the polar pattern. And then he unbuttoned his shirt, and on his chest, he had the frequency response. Just love that. And let's finish it up. Just a few historical photos. Here's the USS Missouri, peace treaty between Japan and the United States after the war ended. And there's General MacArthur standing in front of a Unidyne 1. Here is Mr. Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech. There's a Unidyne 2 there. Actually, there's a second, this microphone here is called a Commando. That's also a Shure microphone here. Bauer was very proud of the fact that the 55S was used to capture this historic address. And in 2018, the Yale University Press brought out this really great coffee table book called Art Deco Chicago. It's about things designed in Chicago that have an Art Deco feel. The front cover here shows the Playboy. It was actually called the Paul Moloff building, but eventually was bought by Playboy and was known as the Playboy Industries. But the back cover, much to our delight and surprise, is the Unidyne. And that was a lovely thing to see. And they also have 3 or 4 pages in the book dedicated to the Unidyne. Now, if you're really interested in more of this, I wrote several books, let's call them booklets, about the history of the Unidyne and Ben Bauer. And I'll leave this up for a little bit. If you want to find it, simply do a Google search and put in Shure Answer ID 2715. Shure Answer ID 2715. That will take you to a page in the Shure FAQ database. Scroll down to the bottom, and there are 2 PDF links. One is a booklet about the Unidyne from 1995, and then one is from the booklet from 2014, which is far more detailed. Has pictures of all the prototypes, has pictures of all the different models, has the Ben Bauer story in it. That's the one to look at. So again, Shure Answer ID 2015. And here's a photo of Mr. Shure, who lived from 1902 to 1995, in 1945, talking into his most famous microphone. So the development of the Unidyne microphone, one of the many inventions in the lab notebooks. It'll take us years to go through these again. It's truly amazing. I had the honor to read all the notebooks and index them. And for me, it was like reading Einstein's notes. Every page was something. This guy was just an amazing genius. Little sidebar. The actual look of this, the industrial design of the Unidyne, it's a registered worldwide trademark of Shure. It's been used without permission by IKEA, websites, a shower head manufacturer, and others intent upon profiting from the Unidyne image. So we basically protect that look of that microphone very, very actively. IKEA had used them on pillowcases, and they were charging more for the pillowcases with the Unidyne image than the pillowcases without the Unidyne image. Therefore, they were profiting from it. IKEA didn't take us seriously. When we got to our 14th letter, eventually IKEA backed down, and no, you can no longer buy those pillowcases with Unidynes on them. Anyway, so that's my presentation, and I will now stop sharing the screen, and we can do show and tell and talk about this, whatever you want to do.
Fantastic presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Are those
Yes.
scans available anywhere?
Of which ones? Of the notebooks?
Of the notebooks, because I was seeing interesting details go by, but
yeah, they're not, because you can contact me. We can talk about these, but our legal department is still. I know that it's still considered intellectual property, and so consequently, I can only say I will look into it.
Yeah.
fair enough.
Yep.
Did Bauer do any work on phono cartridges at Shure?
Yes, he did a lot of it on crystal cartridges primarily, but he also was involved in the early days of the M3D, so the first stereo moving magnet cartridge as well. Yeah, the guy was just, I mean, every day there's something new in these lab notebooks. I've never seen anything like it as far as an idea generator.
Wow.
His sons said that he would come home from Shure, have dinner with the family at about 6 o'clock. work till about 9, sleep 4 hours, and then get up. He was a 4-hour night guy, and then get up and work the rest of the day, rest of the evening, or rest of the evening, early morning, and then go to work to Shure the next day. Just mind blowing.
Wow.
Yeah. And with the Bauer family now, if you're in the Bauer family, and you don't have at least 2 masters and a PhD, you're nothing. It's like the most high performing family I've ever met in my entire life.
Jeez.
Yeah, truly astonishing.
So, Michael.
Yes. Hi, Rick.
At downtown Seattle, a place called Benaroya Hall, which is the home of the Seattle Symphony. There's a transit station built under it, and they have a portion of the light rail system that goes through downtown that runs underground, quasi subway.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And on one of the entrances, there's a handrail that goes from street level down to track level, and in honor of the hall's musical heritage, at each end of the handrail, there's a microphone, and it's a Shure 55.
Oh man, I'd love to see a photo of that. If anybody gets a photo of that, please send it to me. That's so cool.
When they reopen, I will get it.
That's great. I love it. I only know about that because I think Wilson Eyrig is the consulting firm that did the vibration studies for having that transit underneath a symphony hall. But I've never heard about that. Thanks, Rick. I'd love to see that, man. That's way cool.
Actually, further down, there's the railroad tunnel.
Oh, you mean the Great Northern Tracks?
Yes.
Yes.
That's the one that gets through.
And that's the reason why the hall is on rubber baby buggy bumpers.
Yeah, which aren't working as
Big
well as they
ones.
used to.
Big ones, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, originally it was fine, and then they started running bigger trains with more locomotives through. And we were subscribers for several seasons, about 10 there, and occasionally I would be aware of something going on. So I found a schedule, and it correlates.
Yeah. When it's not COVID, my wife and I are pretty active choral singers, and we had a chance to sing in Bremen, Germany. Beautiful, beautiful concert hall, but they've got a tram that goes right by out front, right at street level,
No.
and you're in there, and you there's just no way. That's on concrete, and that just transmits all throughout the hall. Just amazing.
Yeah, no way around it.
No, there's no way around that.
Yeah,
So,
it's subtle, but if you know what you're listening for,
yeah, you're feeling exactly. Luke, are you still there? You had some microphones you wanted to show us, right?
Yeah, well, I think we'll get to that with the introductions. But
Okay.
I actually had a question though.
Yeah.
With the Unidyne 3 cartridge, it's the rear entry ports. It's pretty obvious. That sound can kind of go around. It's less obvious with the Unidyne and Unidyne 2 cartridges. Do you know the technical side of that? Like exactly.
It's through the voice coil gap. If you look at the patent, it's all there.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. If you look at when I showed you the wooden prototype, the reason that wouldn't work is that the back of it was solid, and you can't do that. So on the microphone you're talking into right now, you've got openings there. They just happen to feed into the back of it. Exactly, they're in the voice coil gap. Exactly right.
There's another microphone made by, I think it was American, that looks like the wooden prototype.
Really?
There's a resemblance there.
Yeah. American and Astatic had one too.
Did they? Yeah.
Static was what I was thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, all these companies knew each other, and they freely stole from each other, except for brush development. Brush development had all the technology to do the crystal elements and grow them, and so Static and Shure and American and anybody who made crystal microphones back then all bought the crystals from Brush. And Brush kept that really tightly under control. We sure never figured out how to build their own crystals.
And headphones as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Regarding the voice coil gap being the path for acoustical transmission to cancel for the back wave to cancel out. That's big enough? There's enough space in a voice coil for
Yeah,
audio?
it's probably best to look at the patent. The patent's
Yeah.
freely available, and there's some really good drawings in there.
Yeah.
I'll explain it wrong, and I don't want to do that, but
It'll take you a few hours looking at the fine prints on the patent.
it's astounding. Yeah,
I printed it out and made a really big blow up of the beautifully drawn diagram.
isn't it beautiful? It's a beautiful patent.
Yeah, I love old patent drawings.
Yeah.
Is that typical for directional microphones,
Yes.
that the voice coil is used as the
Well, you got to get
transmission path?
you got to get the audio signal to the back of the diaphragm. So
Yes.
so the diaphragm is going to be, suspended all on, it's going to be glued down like a trampoline. So the only way to get behind there is to come in through the magnet.
You want the sound to have a hard time getting through.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's that network is delaying the arrival of the sound.
Okay,
So that
that makes sense.
A wave from the back and the same wave reaching the front will arrive at the diaphragm at the same time and cancel.
So I mentioned the thing of the cloth, the different colored cloth, and I just love the story because it's so practical. If you go and you look at our catalogs from the 40s and the 50s, nowhere does it say what the color of the cloth is inside the microphone. And yet, if you go by them, you can see, well, there was blue ones and there were red ones and there were some that were black. They tried white for a while, but everybody smoked back then, so they would turn yellow. So you just and the reason this is that Shure would go to a local fabric store and take a device that would measure acoustical impedance by blowing air through the fabric. And they would find a bolt of cloth that was of the proper color, or color they wanted, blow air through it. And if that was the proper impedance, they would buy that bolt of cloth, and that would be the color of the microphone until they ran out of that cloth. And they go back to the store again. That store is in Evanston and it still exists. And there are people there who said, yeah, there used to be these weird guys from Shure came in with this box and they would like blow air through the cloth.
Is there a specification for that stuff?
Yes.
I've got a couple capsules that I need to put new cloth around.
Yes, there is. It's about how many openings per inch and so forth. So I actually found this device not too long ago. It was underneath someone's desk, and it had kind of this big inflatable bladder that you would pump up and so forth. But what the best part of it was it had original cloth colors that had never been exposed to the light. And so
Wow.
So in those Unidyne booklet I mentioned to you that you could find at the Shure Answer ID 2715, there are all the colors in the back. And I basically took the colors and then we made them the equivalent of, what do you call it? There's that color coding. What do you call that now? Where we take a color. Pantone. Thank you. Exactly. So they all have certain Pantone colors like that. But it was so cool to see them because they hadn't faded. Because you'll see ones, for example, some of the old microphones, you'll see that they look like they're a rust color. It's kind of like a rusty brown. That actually was blue. That faded because of the sun.
Oh, geez.
But I love the practicality of it. Yeah, go down there and buy another bolt of cloth.
Do you know how this device was operated?
Yeah.
Did like blow up the bladder and then clamp the cloth in and time how long it took to deflate?
Yeah, well, they had a meter there that would measure, and they would have a comparison. They would have something that was 0 ohms, if you will, and then they'd have something, and they would just blow air through this bladder. It's cool. In big dials and so forth, and handmade, right? But yeah, I love to find stuff like that, and just you think I mean now we buy material which is made to have a certain acoustic impedance. So back then, yeah. Go to
the fabric store.
Go to the fabric store.
Did they ever use cloth with a pattern in it instead of solid color?
Not that I know.
Yeah.
Dan, I've never seen that. You mean like paisley or something?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I've never seen anything like that in there.
That's for the next anniversary.
Right. But we used to inside for the acoustic impedance to slow down the wave. They used to use wool, but then of course wool, it gets wet or absorbs moisture, and it would change like that. So there's a lot of changes like that. Now we have materials which are far more stable than they used to be. But back then, wool seems to work.
Gotta watch the moths, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I watch the moths. Yeah, exactly.
Who's got some real hard? Go ahead.
No, I said it comes with a bag of camphor.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm sure somebody has some real hard questions. I told Michael we would stump him today, but he's been able to field everything easily.
Yeah, been there a long time, Dan.
I have kind of a related question. It goes back to a couple of weeks ago when David Satz was talking about Shep's microphones.
Mm-hmm.
Now, David, having seen what you saw with the Bauer stuff, does that that's why Shep's couldn't patent the acoustic stuff inside the microphone? Because you had mentioned that they patented everything they possibly could.
Right. I don't know, because I'd have to work out when the Bauer patent expired.
1958.
Then there was an overlap, and Shep's couldn't have patented it.
So I'll tell you about the story about Shep's, because and I'm not an expert in Shep's, but I believe is Shep's still independent, or is it owned by another company now?
No, it's still a family-owned business.
Okay, so it was in the late 1990s, and Shep's actually approached Shure, wanting Shure to perhaps buy it. And yep,
I would love to see the evidence.
It didn't go beyond a discussion, because it was between our president at the time and whoever was president of Shep's at the time. They're looking. Anyways, we just said, you take a great brand like Shep's and you put Shure on it, and people say, "Oh, it's not the same anymore." And so we didn't even consider it even more than that.
David, that they were hoping that would be their entrance to the White House, but I guess they got around it.
They found their own way. No, Shep's has not looked to be acquired and has been approached by other companies to acquire them, but I really dispute that they would have done that.
Yeah, that came from the guy. He's passed on now, so I can't tell you. But no matter what, we just knew that would never work. But Luke brought up the White House. Yeah, another part of my job for 25 years, I was the liaison for Shure between Shure and the White House. Started out with Bush #1 and went through Mr. Obama, and that's another story for another thing. That was really interesting. I only give you this aspect of it. One of my first times I went to White House Communications Agency after it took me 6 months to get clearance. I remember going into the facility and walking by a door that said something like, unauthorized entry will be met with deadly force. And I just knew that from there on, whenever I went to the restroom, I said, "Can I have someone take me there, please?"
It's intense.
Yes, very intense.
It's not a question, but I know something that I've discussed with Michael before, and I don't know, maybe somebody would be interested. So the originals did not have the S, and then when they got smaller, they added the S. But then Shure was apparently, I don't know if notorious, but they did a lot of changes without necessarily advertising them. Yes. So, the 556S existed for 20 or 30 years or something, but there may have been internal changes. And the one that comes to mind is, I think it was in 1957, they actually announced that the output was like 5 dB hotter or something.
Right. Yeah.
And that was, they also, it says, use a Alnico V magnet or something. And so presumably they changed the magnet then, which then increased the output.
That's right. A lot of stuff is, particularly microphones, are kept as trade secrets. If you patent it, you have to reveal what you're doing. And so at the time in the 50s and 60s, we didn't have counterfeit problems. Today, a lot of stuff we keep secret so that counterfeiters don't know what's going on. So, but yes, there. Sometimes you get things like when neodymium magnets started coming around. You just put a neodymium magnet into a microphone, and your output goes up another 4 dB. So sometimes there are material changes which improve the microphones.
Yeah, the actual native impedance of the voice coil on the 55 was about 50 ohms.
Yep.
Which by 56 was straight out.
Yep.
Mighty low output.
That's interesting to know because I've got a preamplifier that has a 50 ohm input impedance.
Yeah. Was it from broadcast? Was it an old broadcast?
Oh yes, Magnacord PT6.
Yep.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I hope you don't have the transport too.
Yes, and it works. The only thing that doesn't work about it is the bias oscillator. And I checked the tube in it. It's factory spec, so there's something else wrong which I haven't managed to track down yet. But anyway,
yeah,
but the preamp works.
That's why microphones back then had low impedance was 38 ohms, 50 ohms, something along those lines, and medium impedance was 150 ohms.
And in consideration that most of the broadcast industry was using ribbon microphones, which start out as a short circuit, basically in terms of their output impedance, and then one transformer leads to another, and finally the grid of the tube.
Yeah, Shure actually made a ribbon microphone in the early 60s called an SM3 that was designed to go up against the RCA, and we never brought it out. We've got a couple of examples in the archive, and every now and then there's a guy up in Canada that's got one. He puts it on eBay for $4,000, and no one's bought it yet. But,
you had a couple of ribbons out later.
Right. Yeah. But this one specifically kind of looked like an RCA. There you go. That's like a 330 or.
I got one just like that, except
300.
without shock mount.
Yeah.
Is it SM33?
Model 300. And I have
one thing
the
I've noticed
output
on
for 50.
both the 55 and those ribbon mics, they're incredibly hum sensitive.
The ribbon mics are, yeah.
Well, the 55 is remarkably sensitive too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but if you, as I say, if you go to the low impedance preamps, they're less so.
No, it's magnetic pickup.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've got a powered monitor here, and if it's on, if I'm within a couple of feet of it.
Well, if you think what's inside a ribbon mic, it's a big loop.
Oh yeah, no, I know.
I saw the ribbon microphone that Rod held up. It's got a red logo on it. That's nice. Is that a Model 300?
That's a Model 300.
Yeah.
So, and I'll tell you that I've had it head to head with a Sennheiser MKH 800, and the frequency response across the entire spectrum cancel if you run them common mode into a mixer, and that they're canceling each other. They'll do it across almost the entire spectrum, with a little bit of an exception at the high frequencies where the Sennheiser carries on. But considering the difference of price, I paid $90 for this, and the Sennheiser about $3,000. So,
and it's got the red logo on it. The red logo is fairly rare. Yeah, it looks like in really good shape.
Yes, it is. It is.
Wow, that's nice.
And it's actually one of my best microphones in terms of certainly below a condenser, but still.
Rod, what is the make and model of that mic?
Model 300, and it's a Shure.
Okay.
I was going to show my first microphone.
That
is also a Shure.
The Starlight. Oh man,
details in the chat, Dan.
Not one of our finest efforts.
But it looks like an intercom.
when I was about 10 years old, and got a hold of a Shure, that's what a tape recorder. That's what came with it.
Yeah.
So, the very first.
Yeah, one of the things. Sometime I have to put together a webinar about our less than finest moments.
There's another one I have here.
Oh.
A 9898.
That was amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah, a single-ended output. It was actually used for some noise measurements in the lumber industry.
It was actually first made for general radio.
Okay, so that's probably what it was hooked up to, a general radio sound pressure level.
Yep. Sound level meter. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've got some. I'll tell you one of our ugliest things we got. You're all familiar probably with the Beta 58 with the kind of the blue color handle and the blue band around the equator. So when we were working on that, we hired a guy who actually was a very famous designer who had done the Batwing logo for Motorola, which they still use, and the 7-Up logo and so forth. But he had never done anything for the pro audio industry. And I think he knew Mr. Shure, and Mr. Shure says, yeah, we're going to hire this guy. So he brings back the first version of the Beta 58. And it was an SM58 handle, the gray handle. The ball was bright chrome, and around the equator was orange polka dots.
Beautiful.
It was hideous. And those of us who are musicians like this, I said, oh God, we can't bring out something like this. And the executives at the time said, no, we paid this guy a lot of money to design this. This is what we're going with.
Oh, no.
And so we begged and pleaded him, could we take 10 versions out and show to sound engineers around the country? We were like laughed out of the booths. And we came back and said, we got to change this. But that's one example of things we have in the archives that we just don't bring out too often. But
Sounds like the NBC logo story.
Oh, what's that? I don't know that one.
Oh, you know that one? And NBC paid this enormous amount of money to design a new logo, and then discovered that somebody at Nebraska Educational Television had designed the same thing for a couple $100.
Well, I was in Nebraska at the time. I think they paid $35 for the
Really? Oh, I overestimated
public television logo. And the NBC forgot to do any kind of a search of these things, which is unbelievable. But they had already changed the logo on their jet airplanes and everything.
Oh, no.
But what they finally did, besides paying all the legal fees, is they gave a complete mobile unit with television cameras and everything to public television in Nebraska to compensate.
They bought them off, huh?
Yes, I never heard that part of the story.
No, I was out there at the time when it happened.
Yeah. We've all got things like that, you know.
The one that comes to mind is Back to the Future, the film. There was a executive at Universal that didn't like the title, and he wrote a memo to Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale saying, and Steven Spielberg saying, I think you should change it to Spaceman from Pluto. And wrote this whole big memo, and Spielberg wrote him back saying, oh, yeah, we loved your joke. It's so funny. We're all laughing about it, whatever. Like he knew he was serious, but he wrote back as if he thought it was a joke. And that executive was never heard from again, and they never, they obviously didn't change the title of the movie.
I'll tell you a personal one from Shure. So I started at Shure in '76, and I was in sales originally. I wasn't a very good salesperson because I wanted to know about the hardware. So Shure brought out in the early '70s a head-worn microphone called an SM10. We still make it today, but we were trying to sell it to TV and TV primarily for intercom, between the cameras. So this is around 1978, and I went to a concert of the Doobie Brothers, and I saw the drummer wearing this and singing it into it. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what a brilliant idea. He's always on mic. It's a noise canceling microphone. What a brilliant idea. A head-worn microphone for a singer. It just all of a sudden it's like, yeah, it's great. So I go back to Shure, and I write a memo to all the executives saying, we got to advertise this as a head-worn microphone for musicians. It'll be great. And I got called into the vice president's office, and he says, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life.
When I was a television director, even in the 1960s, the head microphones we wore, to talk to the camera people, were carbon mics, actually, like telephone.
Yeah. But this
they were ripped from the telephone company.
Right.
Exactly.
This is a dynamic small, and so I just was too young and stupid. I wouldn't give it up. But eventually we ran an ad, and eventually it took off. Now, I don't claim that I was the guy that invented head-worn microphones for singers, but it was just like a repurposing. It was something we already had, and it seems so obvious now and then. But man, they just laughed me out.
I think Madonna gets
Yeah,
some credit
there you
there.
go. There you go. Yeah, but she
Shure
can't.
ever make a version of that with headphones on it?
Yes, yeah. There was an
SM12.
there was an right SM12 had an earpiece.
Ah,
Which was actually great because the earpiece was rigid and you could set it just outside of your ear canal.
Right.
So you could actually have it on, get cues, and mix with both ears open.
Yep.
Very useful.
Wow.
because when I started out doing rock and roll intercoms, we ended up with Bauer headsets.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Well, the SM12 wouldn't get loud enough to do anything like that.
No, it was designed just for the IFB whispering in your ear type of thing.
Right. And
But
I was
but,
designing intercoms to run at 105 dB. So
yeah. But eventually we got reviews and so forth, and then people started using them. Drummers particularly started using them, and then keyboard artists and so forth, and the rest is history. Now headboard microphones, of course, very common, but that wasn't then.
They're not the best sounding thing ever.
No, not granted, but it had a lot of advantages. Like not having a boom arm in your way when you're a drummer when you're trying to go across.
Good enough for a singing drummer.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or for background as well. So yeah. So I'll have to think about that. Just stupid things we did, or things where we almost went this way. And well, I mean, hey, SM58. We tried to sell the TV and radio for the first 6-7 years, and we didn't even think about selling it to rock and roll. That came around. Rock and roll found us. We didn't find rock and roll.
I have one. What's kept you guys from changing the shitty head attachment design on the 57?
On the 57, what do you mean?
It's got this
The
little
nose cone.
copper clip.
Oh, the rotating aspect of it.
The part where if you knock the head off, it's impossible to put it back on.
Well, you notice on like a Beta 57, it doesn't do that.
Well, right.
Right.
But the original 57, the SM57.
Yep. So we had a patent on that. There's a design patent on it. And the other aspect is that remember old Coke, new Coke? Remember when Coke decided to change one thing? Remember when Fender guitars got bought by CBS and you changed one thing? So you got to be really careful when you've got something that's so well established that you make even a change that you think is an improvement. And then the world now with social media is like, oh, it's not as good as that anymore.
The magic is in that retaining clip, Dan.
Man, unbelievable.
And look how that worked out for Gibson.
Yeah. Good point.
I've broken a couple of those clips trying to put on and take off.
Trying to put it back.
Yeah.
Break it.
How to use a serviceable part.
Yeah.
There's an RK kit that has the cap and the funny little spring that goes inside it and a replacement label, and you get that, and it's a slam dunk to replace it.
Yeah, but it's a case of we just don't want to. We don't want to. There's certain things like we would never change anything about the 58. You're just not going to change it. You can bring out a Beta 58. You can bring out a Beta 58 with a switch, like that. But you just don't change certain things because even if it is exactly the same, the world won't believe it.
Did moving the manufacturing site does that change things?
Yeah, I was going to say, Michael, they don't believe it anyway. So
right. Yeah, well, that's true. Well, we built things in Evanston until 1985 when we opened up our plant in Mexico.
Right.
And that was, and by the way, that is Shure owned, Shure employees, all the benefits. It's not like a third party pay. Actually, the quality went up, and and that's all well documented that the rate of returns, the rate of scrap rate, all that stuff got better when we went down there. So
just went down for the lower overhead, I guess.
Yeah, certainly less labor cost, but the quality of the work is really good. And people and
probably new machinery and everything too, though.
Yeah, right. New machinery, exactly. But it's I always say that when you've got a brand that's as well respected as Shure, and I also want to tell you something about the company as well. But hold that. You don't do things to make that quality go down. That's just stupid. But what I was going to tell you about the company, and because we don't advertise this, but I think you might want to know it, is that Mr. Shure owned it lock, stock, and barrel from 1925 to 1995. Then Mrs. Shure owned it until 2016. Now the company is owned by a trust. The trust is held by the employees, and the beneficiary of the trust is philanthropical use. So basically, we're a for-profit company that uses its profits at the end of the year for philanthropic uses. So
nice.
That's
Nice.
cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean,
Classy.
we still have to, we have to pay people and buy buildings and so forth. But there's a chunk of change that would have gone to the Shures if they were still alive as dividends, and they would have given it away too. So we do the same thing. The other thing Mr. Shure set up is that if the company can never stand on its own financially, we will fold. We will never sell. So we won't become like Eltic Lansing, what does that mean now? How many times is that brand?
Yeah.
Sold, right. So I think that's RCA, exactly right. Bell and Howell.
RCA, part of Radio Shack.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. So Mr. Shure is a very smart guy, and just set it up. So that's how it works. And we don't brag about it and so forth, but I'd like to tell people who are particularly in the industry that that's how we're set up, and it's, makes me proud to work there. By the way,
that's cool.
By the way, 45 years only gets you number 7 in seniority. By the way.
Say, Dan, should we do the show and tell now or with introductions?
I want to ask 2 more questions.
I got a question too when time comes.
I've got one too.
Okay. So is every model of every microphone built in Mexico? Are there any still built in Evanston?
No, well, first of all, we're not in Evanston anymore.
Or wherever you are.
Yeah, no, in Illinois, we have our corporate headquarters and our R&D. We have our distribution center for the Americas, but all the manufacturing is either in a Shure facility in Mexico or a Shure facility in Suzhou, China. But I tell you, we're looking about building another facility back here in the United States now. It may take a while to do that, but we want to have a third place because, just with political issues and so forth, you just never know.
Yeah.
I have a question too.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of a late arrival here. My internet has been out for the past 24 hours.
Ooh.
And I spent like 3 hours on the phone with tech support this afternoon trying to fight it out. And I finally got one computer connected.
Wow.
Graham entered about 3 minutes ago.
Michael, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Shure was always very well known for manufacturing some of the best general use phono cartridges available. Are they still making any? And of considerable importance, are they making replacement styli for things like the M44 and SC35 or something like that?
V15.
They still make any of that?
No, we do not, but I can tell you the story. So first of all, when I started at Shure in 1976, phono cartridges were 60% of our business. In 2018, when we got out of the business, phono cartridges was 0.5% of our total business. So that's how much it had fallen.
Wow.
The second thing is that most of the actual machinery that we use to make phonograph cartridges had been built in the 50s and 60s, and it literally was held together with duct tape and chewing gum. I mean, if you guys could see the machinery, it's embarrassing, and we couldn't buy anymore because all those companies are gone.
Does the machinery still exist?
We have some of it, but it's not in workable condition. And then the third thing was the suppliers that we had dried up. We used to have 10 suppliers of diamond tips that had gone down to 2. We used to have 3 suppliers of shanks that had gone down to 1. And frankly, they weren't interested in the business anymore. And we were finding that we would build 50 cartridges and reject 20 of them. So eventually what we ended up doing is saying, look at it. Eventually this bad stuff's going to get out into the market and we're going to lose our reputation. So we decided to get out of it when we still had a good reputation. If you want to get styluses, there's a company called in Japan whose name just escaped me.
SAS?
No.
Jico?
Yes, thank you. That's it. JICO. And they make replacement styli for almost all Shure cartridges and good ones as well. So it became, it just became too small of a business and too difficult to. Oh, one other thing, real estate. It took about, if you take the actual plant where we had all the material or all the machinery to make phonograph cartridges, took up 4 times the space of the space to make our ULXD wireless microphone systems.
God.
Yeah. So,
I just had to get a replacement stylus. I do a lot of audio restoration work in phonograph discs, and I just had to get the guys in England.
Oh yeah, I know, the replacement stylus company or whatever it's called.
Expert stylus.
That's them. Yeah.
I had to get them to take a stylus that I had from Stanton.
Oh yeah.
And send them the stylus assembly, have them take it apart and put the new tip on for me.
Yep.
And so they did a superb job on it.
Yep.
I was very pleased with it. But they're about the only place that I knew of that I could get something that wasn't really crap.
Yep. There's also a company in the UK, Vanderhall, that makes high-end cartridges and stuff as well. But
Vandenhull, I think.
Yeah, Vandenhull.
Vandenhull, yeah.
Yep. But it's just, for us, it was just, you look at particularly 60% down to half of 1%, right? So for us, pre-COVID, wireless microphones became our biggest part of our business. So
listen, I have a small but carefully guarded collection of a couple of Shure cartridges in mounts and so on, ready to roll, and I've got a selection of what styli Shure was making available at the time, so that I've got this stuff on hand if I need it.
That's
great. I don't know what I'm going to do when I run out of it.
Yeah, I understood. I also bought a few things myself and stored them away.
Smart move.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
Michael, can
funny.
you comment on the transition into being a wireless company?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And this might be a good thing for a few, if you like this presentation, we introduced our first wireless microphone in 1953.
By Telex?
Yeah, it was
pre-Telex.
Yeah, no, this is pre-Telex. It was called the Vagabond, and it was 5 miniature tubes inside the transmitter, and an all-tube system. So we sold that from 53 to 1960. Got out of the business. Didn't get back into the business until 1986, and that's when we did a joint project with Telex and Shure. And since then, it became from a small part of our business to now the major portion of our business. Of course, COVID put a big dent in that because touring sound is down now and so forth. But the story about Vagabond back in the 1950s is a pretty interesting one. And maybe if Dan or Tom invite me back, we can do that in the future as well.
Yes, please.
What happened to those little mixers that Shure used to make? The 4 pots and a master and.
Oh yeah, well I was the product manager for those. As a matter of fact, any of you guys remember the FP line of mixers, FP31, FP?
Sure.
Like that. Well, here's a little story. Though I told Shure management FP stood for field production, it actually stands for Frank Petterson, my father.
Very good.
But yeah, we made small small mixers from around 1966 through around 2000. The FP33 disappeared just a few years ago, but in the mid 90s, we had to make a decision: were we going to put more money into mixers, or were we going to put more money into wireless microphones? And we thought wireless microphones was a bigger market. And 2 guys that used to work for me at Shure, named Matt Anderson and John Tatulis, left Shure and started a company called Sound Devices.
Oh, I've used Sound Devices products a lot.
Yeah, John and Matt came out of college, worked for me. They saw this and they had the opportunity. They said, well, if Shure's not going to pay much attention to this mixers, let's go form our own company. And of course, Sound Devices is just make astonishingly great stuff. And much like Shure, incredibly reliable.
And the film industry uses Sound Devices recorders extensively, yes.
Yep.
And so that
So-
I'm on my second one. The first one finally failed, but I had the fourth one they ever made.
Yep.
And of the 722, and then I had to reply. The new ones are, of course, they're tiny. Where you first think,
they're astonishing.
and
They're
they're
astonishing.
they're pretty great quality. But I had to be convinced that because it was smaller and cheaper, that is this really the same quality? But it was.
Yeah. So they started a nice business, do a great job. We don't do. Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Mac.
Yep. And I will tell you this also proudly. The first product they ever brought out was the MP1, which was their mic to line amplifier.
Oh.
MP is my initials, and John and John named it after me because he liked the fact that I made the FP1 after or FP31 after my dad, and John made the MP1 after me, which I was.
I'm speaking to you now through an MP1.
There you go.
Oh, there you go.
And
Cool.
I was very honored that those guys did that. They're great guys.
Michael, this is something you'll probably like to know. Many years ago, I put a couple of those little mixers of yours into a press system for our then Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in Canada, of course.
I heard your accent.
Yeah, sorry about that. But I was just going to tell you, our present Prime Minister is Pierre Elliott Trudeau's son.
Right.
How do you like that?
Yeah.
Right.
I've often wondered whether they've still got that press kit that I put together.
They just may.
Probably.
Yeah.
So here's one for you, Michael.
Yes, Rick.
In the 70s, I worked for Tapco.
I remember that.
Ended up getting swallowed by Electro Voice.
Yep.
And when I was when I became part of Electro Voice, we were encouraged to not use the word "Shure" as a sign of confirmation, and we were supposed to say, "Oh, certainly." They're still ruining the day that the SM58 ate their lunch.
I can't really. They were that. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Certainly.
Wow.
Oh, but of course.
I love that.
Man,
I have a question about higher end. Sure, we always thought of because when I was a teacher in this recording studio, we had at least 20, 57s, 58. Yep. But we also had a couple of the KSM capacitor mics that were, and I thought were very good.
Yes.
And switchable patterns. And I know the person who replaced me when I retired called me up once and paid me to come in and bring some of my own mics because we don't have any good mics here. We want to use Shep's and everything, but I frankly think those KSMs would have been just as good. And I loved them, and they had very low noise. And I don't understand why. But I guess the name Shure still.
You're right. No. There's the brand stigma about this. Oh yeah, they make great microphones to row, but no, you gotta have a Neumann for a recording studio. I will tell you something about the KSM though. Originally, we were going to call it the CSM, condenser studio microphone, and there's three of us sitting around one day at lunch, and we were just having fun and goofing off, and I said, maybe we should call it the condenser studio microphone, so we can make it. So we could make it sound German, and the other guy said, "Yeah, let's do that," and that's why it's KSM.
That's an interesting story. I'm glad to know that.
Not everything
Michael?
is serious. Yes.
So back to phono cartridges.
Yes.
So what are the facts about why the V15 stopped? The word I always heard was the beryllium, right?
Yes. The only reason the 5 worked so well is because of the beryllium shank, which was very rigid, very lightweight, and gave you that incredible frequency response. So and I can't tell you exact dates, but in the early 2000s or something, OSHA determined that beryllium dust and using beryllium at all could be carcinogenic. And so there was, to actually continue to make them with beryllium would require, I don't know, millions of dollars worth of safety equipment. But really, Mrs. Shure, who was running the company at the time, as soon as she heard that, she said, we're not going to make anything that could put any of our people at risk. So if beryllium is like that and OSHA is like that, we're going to stop doing it. So we stopped doing that because Mrs. Shure was so concerned about it hurting anybody. So that's
And
what
one more.
Probably the federal government probably wants all the beryllium for their atom bombs as a neutron reflector.
that could be too, but and we didn't create beryllium dust. We rolled it, but OSHA didn't care. You're working with beryllium, you have to have these safety things.
Well,
and so forth.
I mean, I just bought a pair of speakers that have beryllium tweeters in them, and it comes with a sticker and a warning. It says,
Does it?
If you ever crack the dome, slap the sticker over it and send it back. Do not do anything else with it. Do not touch it.
Wow.
Do not go near it.
Wow.
Is
Seal
this
it up and send it back.
is this made in USA or somewhere else where they don't care about such things as the safety?
No, they're for calls made in France.
Oh, okay.
And then, Michael, you don't make the SM81 anymore, right?
Oh yeah. Oh no, dude, absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
do you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we were talking about that before you came on.
That's a good microphone.
Introduced in 1978, and we were so late in getting into condenser microphones. I was telling Dan before, because people, if it said Shure on it, they were going to treat a condenser microphone like it was an SM58, and so we had to figure out how to make a microphone that durable, and that's. But SM81 is still a good seller for us.
Oh, good.
The thing that's the huge seller for us right now is the SM7, the SM7B. That microphone came out in 1972. That's the voiceover microphone, right? And for 35 years languished, didn't do anything. And in 2008, podcasters got a hold of it and started telling other podcasters. Check this out now. In 2020, just ended. We sold 100 times more SM7s than we did in the year 2000. 100 times.
Wow.
I had a student whose father was head of technology for WNYC, WQXR in New York, the best.
Yeah, sure.
They use SM7s throughout for their announcers completely. And I have one in my studio I use sometimes for certain audiobook readers.
I tell you, the SM7 just by itself would make a good-sized audio company.
Yeah. Well, I think Michael Jackson recorded on him.
He did. Yes, he did. Yep. The Thriller album was done with that. So, but imagine, you read MBA books, right? Or look at Apple. How long Apple life cycle products, right? Here's a product that's going to be 50 years old now and is selling more than it's ever sold in its life. It doesn't fit any of the standard product life cycles. Microphones are just weird that way. They can take off after being available for 40 years.
Yeah, talk to the 545.
Is the cartridge still the same in the SM7?
Yes, it's a variation of a Unidyne 3. It's very similar to an SM7, different compliance on the microphone diaphragm, and about 3 times as many windings on the voice coil. Yeah. Luke, you said something? Sorry.
I was making a joke. I said to tell that longevity to the 545.
Yeah, right. 1959 for the 545, exactly. Yeah, but that's what's so strange about microphones. I mean,
Michael?
Yes.
Did you ever hear the story of Gotham Audio and the Neumann microphones and the Neumann microphones that were badged as Telefunken that were imported both into Canada and in the United States? Apparently, if somebody had a Telefunken microphone that needed repair, they had to send it to Gotham Audio. And Herr Temmer refused to send a Telefunken microphone back out from his repair. They took the Telefunken badge off and put the Neumann badge on.
Oh, God.
Unbelievable. By the way, I find that completely believable.
That's not only believable, it's the absolute truth.
I have no doubt about that.
It's well documented.
Temmer was the most obnoxious bugger I've ever come across. I ran into him at an AES convention in New York, many years ago, and I wanted to, say hello and be friendly and so on. And I just found him to be obnoxious with a big O.
Sure.
Bill agrees.
Well, there's a reason he's
He
called
had a-
Harry Timmer.
And he had a bloody little private plane that he bopped around in.
Wow.
That was bought, obviously, with the enormous profits that he made off George Neumann's stuff. Unbelievable.
Wow.
And the guy who was his rep in Toronto, Canada, a guy named Bill Woods, operated a company called Jamar Electronics, and he was Gotham's distributor in Toronto. He was flying a plane too.
Wow.
Good. Well, we're getting a little off topic here. So does anybody have any further stump Michael questions?
Michael.
Hey, Bill.
Hi. I remember going to the Acoustical Society meeting at a hotel in Chicago. And I was trying to decide whether I should go to the AES or whether I should join them for audio work and study. And so I went to the banquet, and the president of the society stands up and talks to the back of a 55 for the whole dinner. It's true. I said, they're not for me. You know, that was the end of that.
And let me say something just for everybody here. Bill Hanley is one of the guys that probably did more for Shure than almost any other engineer as far as putting our microphones in the hand of great artists in the 60s and 70s. And so whenever I get a chance to thank him, I thank him. So thank you, Bill.
Well, Walker, too.
I'm sorry, what?
Walker, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We pushed short. EV didn't have a ghost of a chance.
So I have another SM58 story for you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was doing a rock and roll show, and the stage was set on a flatbed trailer in front of a drive-in movie theater screen. And we had a rocker, and they didn't tell us that he was a mic twirler.
Oh, no.
And so we didn't put the obligatory 3 rolls of duct tape on the connector.
No.
So he's going through his routine and swinging that sucker around, and we're just kind of cringing. And finally, he swung it really good, and at the apex of the swing, the connector let go, and the microphone went sailing.
Oh, no.
Up and over the back of the drive-in movie theater screen, and it landed in the bed of a pickup truck full of ice. And it still worked. Of course, we squeezed a new microphone out of the band.
There's a wonderful YouTube of Roger Daltrey talking about him swinging the SM58 and why he did that. And he just says, you know, Pete Townsend used to take these long solos on stage, and I got bored, and I just decided to start swinging because it had nothing else to do with it. He says that when my eyesight was really good, I could flick the cigarette out of his mouth.
Yeah, except I think the first time I did Roger Daltrey, it was a 565 with the screw-on connector on the back of it.
Oh yeah, Amphenol connector. Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned this when I did a live at Leeds presentation last year, but on some Who recordings, if they didn't get too hands-on with mixing the live recordings, you can actually hear when he's swinging because it'll go past the drums and you hear.
Oh, that's cool. I'd like to hear that. That's great.
Live Leslie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Michael, say something about the MV7 podcaster's mic.
Sure. Well, I'll show it. Here you go.
That's what we're hearing.
Yep. Yes, it is. It came out in last October. It's way cool. I've been using it for a year now because I had an early prototype. It's basically, it's not a Unidyne 3 element. It's a very similar to a Unidyne 3, but it's not a Unidyne 3. So it's a second cousin of the Unidyne 3. It's got USB output on it. It's got headphone output on it. But what I think is really cool on it is it's also got an XLR analog balanced output as well that you can use at the same time. So I did something recently where Shure UK was interviewing me about the SM7 history, and we were using the USB output to actually do the online interview, and at the same time, I took the XLR output and ran into my Sound Devices recorder and created an audio digital file for that, and then sent that to Shure UK, and then they mixed it together and it sounded like we were in the same room, like what NPR does. But it's like, I think it's $250 retail, and I just think it's a really great sounding mic, and it's just so freaking easy to use. Now, there's an app you can get to it, if you want to use it with the app, but I've never taken the time to hook it up. It just comes out, and it's great. If you can't afford the $499, look at $249 for this MV7. Available in silver and black.
Do you need USB power to use the XLR output?
No, you don't.
Okay.
You don't. Yeah, it can be used just like a standard, dynamic microphone for that. So it's very cool. It's very cool. So we're having a hard time making it. I got to tell you, it's so strange. The COVID year, we were just Shure was really worried about what was going to happen to the business. Our business went through the roof because of people at home trying to do, podcasting and content creation and so forth. And we're very fortunate. Our business actually grew in 2020.
Wow. Sweetwater was saying they were having $1 billion year.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
I read that too.
Amazing.
Wow.
Hey, somebody else
needs a couple more bucks.
Boom.
Yeah.
Here's an old 565.
Where's that? Who's holding that up?
That was some more.
That
We
was
can't
Tom.
see you. We can't see you.
Oh.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, they were
Freddie Mercury microphone.
Yeah, and it's old enough. It made in USA. It has the chrome switch protector.
Hey, let me ask Bill. I've always wanted to ask you this question because Bill used the 565 at Woodstock. All the Woodstock mics had this little adapter on it. Went from Amphenol to XLR. Did you guys make those, or were they made by someone?
Canon had them.
Canon had them. Okay.
And Switchcraft.
Switchcraft too, yeah.
Yeah,
Canon.
there's one on this 55 here.
There wasn't enough room for the collar on some of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
With the hold on the Amphenol position.
Okay.
The Switchcraft.
Grind it down a little bit so the
Had to
stand
do-
would go on.
Ah.
The Switchcraft number is L3MN.
They still make it, Rick?
Yeah.
L3M.
Well, they're hard to find, but yeah.
L3MN. Thank you. I'm gonna write that
And
down.
if you wanted one, I would send you one.
Let me see if I can
I
find
probably
it.
have a couple of the Canon ones in the junk box.
Wow, the Canons. And were they the same length, or were they basically duplicates of each other? Mm.
They you have to remove the connector insert.
Right. And
Which I did for my 545S. The problem is in the course of doing that, pulling all the wires, something went on the fritz, and so that's currently sitting in the junk bin because I haven't gotten around to completely rewiring the inside of the microphone. But here, get Rick talk a bit so we can see that.
Okay, let's see, Rick. So you
can't hear you, Rick.
I wasn't talking.
Ah, okay.
That's why.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
Funny that.
There you go. And it's funny, and I never saw that. And when I started doing some research for when Woodstock was coming around for the 50th anniversary, I found some photo and I blew it up, and I could see that the microphone was just a little bit long. And then I talked to Bill, and Bill said, "Oh yeah, we added those adapters." And I was like, "Wow, how cool!"
I live to hate
Are
those
you guys
Amphenol
calling
connectors.
Amphenol the screw-on things?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
91 series connector.
Yeah, those Amphenol connectors go all the way back to the 30s. They were good connectors. There's nothing wrong with the connectors except that they just took longer to put on and take off than an XLR.
Well, and the strain
They're a
relief,
pain
if
to
you
put
tightened
on.
it down too much, would cut right through the cable.
That too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
And I actually did have problems with mine on my 545S that depending on how you had it in there, it would randomly cut out, and that was one reason why I wanted to swap it out.
Yeah.
And were the Amphenol ever balanced? I always thought they were only unbalanced.
Oh no. They're balanced.
They made
Oh, yeah.
a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4 conductor connector.
Yep.
Typically the
High impedance.
Typically the 3 was for high impedance. Well, depending on the mic, the 3 you could switch between high and low, but you had to switch in the mic. The 4 pin one, you would switch impedance depending on what pins you connected to on the connector.
Right. You actually switched on the equipment end. You basically chose what you want.
Or if you had a ready-made cable that was for high impedance for that microphone, then that's what you plug into the mic.
Right.
And Electro Voice actually shipped with a quick connect or quick change connector where it was plastic, and you would just kind of take one of the pins out and move it to another position to go from high to low.
Okay.
And when I was a teenager, I actually worked in a theater that had outlets built in on stage that used that connector.
Amphinols?
Oh. The Amphinols.
Really?
And we hated them. They were beat up and they didn't work very well. And it generated a lifelong hate for that connector.
The threads would get munged.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Beeb didn't like the Amphinols because of the reasons you were just saying, so they used the Western Electric.
Oh yeah, right.
Yep. And then they had to make these little adapters to go onto XLRs eventually. So you've got that and that. And this used to live on top of the mic stand, and you could just take the mic off and leave this on top of the mic stand.
So it's my understanding, and you guys would know that originally the Canon was an X connector, and then there was an XL because they added a lock, and then there was an XLR because they added this resilient rubber aspect of it. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Strain relief.
That's as I understand it.
Strain relief. Okay.
Make sure you tell your children about Canon UA connectors.
Oh, look at that!
I haven't seen one of those for a while.
Man,
they're hard.
They work great when you can find them, but good luck trying to find one these days. They literally go for, I think, about $70 sometimes.
What's the mic? What mic is it on, Luke?
What's the EV655C?
The broadcast Electro Voices use those.
Yeah, I think only Electro Voice adopted that connector.
Yeah, the 666s I think had them too.
Yeah, the 666s definitely have them. Yeah.
Well, I think ABC also tried to convert their physical plant to those connectors.
Yeah,
that cost a fortune because their whole thing was they didn't catch on because they were so much more expensive than XLRs, but they were superior as far as durability, but they just too expensive. Michael, I have all right, the screw-on connectors, I'm still a little confused.
Okay.
When I was a kid, we had a cheapo Bogan PA system.
Yep.
That had the cheapo high impedance unispheres
with a little dot in the middle of it.
Yeah. So what is that? Is that an Amphenol connector too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. MC1, right, Rick? MC.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And then there was one that had 2 connections, and one that had 3, and one that had 4.
And Switchcraft second sourced them.
Oh, they did. Oh.
Yeah.
When I was in
There
high
you
school,
go. Look at Bill's
There you
screen.
go. That's the 2 version.
Yeah. We were talking about the Commando earlier.
Oh, get the Commando! Yeah, man.
right. When I was in high school, we had the screw-on. I guess they were unbalanced. I guess it was the Series 1. Then when I was in college, we used the really large XLRs, those ones that are
P series.
And then later, after I got out of college, I worked where we had the standard XLR we use today.
Yeah.
I think we should all hold off and get Michael to come back so we can give him a talk on different connectors.
This is great, man. Man, talk about a knowledgeable group, man. This is it. I just need to come to you guys when I have questions like this.
When I had a set of, I had a pair of EV666 microphones.
You can hammer nails with those.
With those, if you dropped one, you were in serious trouble if your foot was in the way.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I did was make a couple of 8-inch pigtails with the UA connector to plug into the mic, and a 6 or 8-inch pigtail, and an XLR3 male on the other end of it. I hated those UA connectors.
You know, there was a company that made new Amphenol connectors for many, many years. And they got bought out a while ago, and they got rid of them. So you look at eBay now for Amphenol connectors, and man, they've gone up like a factor of 2 or 3 times. So you cannot get new ones anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you buy a mic with an Amphenol connector, make sure you get the cable with it.
Wow.
Even more so with the Canon UA.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
And how are we doing with time?
It's going by.
You don't say.
I had one question for Michael about the Vocal Master.
Oh,
Are
yeah.
you aware of the?
Wow.
What was there ever a giant installation of those? I've always wondered what a line of 6 of those would have sounded like.
You know, I've heard various. You know, I'm going to ask Bill this. Bill, what you were involved with the Beatles at Shea Stadium, right? What did you use? What columns did you use there?
Well, I didn't do that one. That's the 65.
Okay.
Yeah, weren't those Bozak or something?
No, those were
No.
Bozak. Leo wasn't into that kind of a column. He was
Okay.
I
giant.
think they were university stuff or some description.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't find out what it was. It was set up with 2x4s holding it in position.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
And individually, they weren't malted together into a big line. They were just
distributed.
separate units.
Now the Vocal Masters never had any really. I mean, we sold a lot of them. And I just got an email from a guy in Gander, Newfoundland, who bought one in 1972, and it's still working. And he set it out. He didn't need it anymore. He set it out on his on the driveway, and someone like took it, picked it up, and lived it. I mean, those things, they never died, but they were never any big installations of them, to my knowledge.
Okay.
I would disagree. They never die.
Okay.
We had a bunch of them in our rental stock when we bought a company here in Seattle, and I got very tired of fixing those things.
Were you fixing the thermistor? The thermistor always went out.
That was the first thing, and the power supply caps would go out.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so Bill, you're gonna say something?
I was going to say, did anybody ever hear of Bill Webb?
Bill Webb. No,
Webb
Jim
Sound
Webb.
at Indianapolis Speedway.
Oh, okay.
He did the stuff at the fair out there. And he would do the stuff on the big auditorium, or big arena type setup. And when anybody would blow on the microphone, he would turn it off and then walk all the way up to the stage and change the microphone and go back and turn it on again. Protect his microphones and sound system.
Yeah.
He was a character.
The Vocal Masters, Dan, went from around 1967 to around 1982, and then they were discontinued. So.
Okay. Any
They
other
also had
questions
the
for
amusing
Michael?
spring reverb, so you could test them.
Yeah. Boing.
Make sure the amplifier is working.
I know it.
That was Fisher, wasn't it? Made the reverb unit.
Yeah, the space expander.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Fisher.
Okay. Boy.
Ah, yes.
There we go.
There it is.
The vocal smasher.
There you go, man. And Go Girl Extra.
So that's a dated ad.
Right.
And then there's the feedback switches on the left. Feedback. They were just like notch. They were like notch filters put in random. Like maybe it'll probably feedback at 400 hertz. So we'll put one in there.
Well, just put them all.
They were more like crater filters than notches.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got craters. Yeah, you're right. They're craters. Yeah, agreed.
Other questions for Michael? His dinner is waiting, I believe.
Oh, this is too much fun. I can do that later. It's so rare I can get. I mean, what a knowledgeable group, man. I mean, I got to come back just because I learned.
That's what's so special about this bunch.
It really is.
You ask anything, and they find out. Somebody was looking for something for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they came here, and it was in the chat. The answer was in the chat in about 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's an amazing group.
Yeah.
Michael.
So let's meet the group.
Yes.
If there's no more questions,
I just had one more. If that's
go ahead. Last question.
Okay, Tom. Go ahead, Tom.
So what? I like to always find this out with people in the business. What do you like to listen to personally? Like, what do you like to listen to music? And if so, what are your interests?
Okay, let's think about pre-COVID. Actually, I'm a very very active musician myself. My wife and I sing choral music. I'm actually a published arranger of choral music as well. But the stuff I play is I play big band rhythm guitar. So I love Count Basie.
Freddie Green.
Well, if you, I have a website, freddiegreen.org, and it's all about how to play like Freddie Green, because I was so puzzled by the way he sounded, and it took me decades to figure out how to sound like Freddie Green. So there's this website will tell you what he did, how to sound like Freddie Green, and eventually I met his son, and his son and I wrote the only biography about Freddie Green.
Awesome.
And we sold tens of copies.
Did he play through an amplifier?
No,
he strictly
there you go. Thank you, Gary. That is the website that we started here. He did not. He did not play amplified guitar. They mic'd him sometimes, but it was all. And I've had the opportunity that Gretsch guitar there at the bottom. I actually had the opportunity to try to play. The guy had superhuman strength. The distance at the 12th fret, the distance between the fret and the string was a half an inch.
Oh, jeez.
Whoa.
But this is something where I wrote, in 2000, I wrote a short article in Downbeat about how Freddie sounded. And basically, and if there's any guitar players here, he hit all the strings, but he only sounded one note. So it made it sound like it was a chord, but it was actually just kind of one note, because you're in an 18-piece orchestra. You don't need to play the chords. You just basically need to sound, what the rhythm was. So I wrote this article. I thought I'd be done with it. I got emails from around the world. What more do you know about Freddie? What more do you know about Freddie? So
yeah.
So I started this website with my buddy in Vermont, who's a webmaster. And eventually that's how I met Freddie's son. And that's how I eventually got to, meet Freddie's family and a couple Christmases ago, a small package shows up from Freddie's son, and I open it up, and it's Freddie's passport from the 1960s when the Basie band was traveling overseas.
Oh wow!
Oh.
Yeah, so it's just a lovely, lovely thing to do. But man, what a ride that's been! And we get like 100,000 visitors a year on the website. And
if you wanted to talk to us about Freddie Green, we would.
Are you kidding? Oh, are you kidding, man? I'd love to do that.
I'm not kidding at all.
No, I would love.
Anytime you want. Anytime you want.
Can we? The best thing to do is if we could figure out a way. I don't know. I know how it's easy to share video on this. Is there an easy way to share audio on Zoom? I don't know.
Luke is the expert on that.
Luke?
Well, I used to be. Now Zoom makes it pretty easy. When you share your screen, you also select share my audio, and then there's an option for like high quality music or something.
Well, Dan, what you asked me, lecture about Freddie, I'm always ready to do that. And I've got wonderful examples of rare things where he plays some solos, some things where you can actually hear him.
About 3 weeks from today.
Hey, listen, send me the invite. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
He's really something. And I only met him once, and I met him after a concert, and I said, he signed a ticket for me. I said, Mr. Green, would you be willing to sit down and talk about how you play guitar? And he looked at me in the eye and said, no, and he walked away. So I had to figure this out all on my own. And eventually, it's been thing, and to be an honorary member of the Green family is like the greatest award of my life. They're such sweet people.
The famous quote from Lee, I think it's from Lee Brenkman, who was the sound engineer at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco forever, was that Count Basie would say, if you can't hear Freddie Green, the band is too loud, and I'll have them play quieter.
Green, you're playing too loud. That's right.
Yeah.
It's just been an amazing 20 years. I mean, the day I figured it out, what he was doing, it was just like, oh my God! And all the books that had been written previously were wrong, because he never talked about it. You know, here was a guy who didn't graduate from high school, and he was making a living. Why would he tell anybody what he was doing? You know, so it's pretty cool. What happened to Dan? Dan,
I'm trying to find a pen so I can write this down because I'll forget.
Oh, it's that analog writing.
Michael, I first really started noticing Freddie Green on those roulette live albums.
Oh yeah, right, yeah.
Because that's the first time you can really hear what he's doing in concert with
I tell you what, if you can, there's an LP. Butch Miles, the drummer, did an LP in the '80s called "Hail to the Chief," and it is the best recording ever of Freddie.
I'll get that.
It's hard to find. He never made a CD of it. It's on. You can find it on eBay every now and then. But Freddie is recorded so well, and Butch just like honored. Butch worshipped Freddie, and he actually paid him to be on the record. The record producer didn't want to hire Freddie, and Butch says, "If we're doing this record, Freddie's going to be on it." And it's the best recording ever of Freddie as far as hearing him and so forth. So. Yeah, so I did that, and then through that I met Bucky Pizzarelli, and Bucky did a CD called Five for Freddie, which is all about Freddie, and I wrote the liner notes for that. And so
cool.
Microphones aside, Freddie Green has been a huge influence in my life, and it's so much fun to sit in a big band and play four to the bar. It's just nothing like it, you know. Someone said that you know, big band rhythm guitar is like vanilla in a cake. You know, if it's in there, you don't know it, but if it's not there, you know something's been left out.
Yeah,
that's a great quote too. Let's talk more about that in the future.
Sure,
I'm serious. Sure. I'm dead serious about this.
I'd be thrilled.
Great, great. It's a deal.
I'm happy that you and you know
done.
By the way, the book's available online, but it's very expensive. I would suggest you just look for it in a local library. There's libraries that have it. I think they're like it's like $70 or $80. You know.
And somebody put it in the chat, so we've got the link now.
Cool.
In the chat,
please. That would be great fun, man.
Good.
You won't be able to shut me up. Sorry.
That's good. Okay. Let's meet everybody who's here today.
Yes, please.
I'm going to start with William. I'll call out your name and just say briefly who you are, where you are, what Shure microphone you're holding on to, if any, and keep going. So, William.
Yeah. I'm just outside of Philadelphia, and of course I had the Commando.
Yeah.
So, and it still works.
Yeah, that's a controlled magnetic. Those things don't die.
And what's your connection to audio?
Oh God, too long. It's literally
25
started
words or less.
Yeah, literally started 60 years ago in theater, doing theater audio.
All right.
So I was about that big at the time, using Bogan amplifiers.
Yeah, yeah.
And
all right,
55s and 666s.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, thank you, Vaibhav.
Hi guys, Vaibhav here from New Delhi, India. Student audio engineer in the
What
making.
time is it there?
7 a.m.
Okay, jeez.
He's a night owl.
Yeah, I am a night owl. That's very true. Yeah, student audio engineer in the making and a guitar player now. Again.
All right.
And
do you know Shure? There is a Shure India. Did you know that there is a Shure office in India?
Yeah, actually, like the person. Fully. I'm not. Actually, I'm familiar with Fully more.
Oh yeah, I know Fully. Yeah. Great guy.
So
tell him if you talk to him, tell him Michael says hi. He knows me.
Oh yeah, I don't talk to him, but he gave a presentation just about a year ago about RF.
Yeah.
And he was really cool. Shirt, t-shirts, and bags, which is one of my favorite things.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Vaibhav. Tom.
Yeah, Tom Fine, Brewster, New York. Do mastering and transfer work, and the only Shure I have some SM57s, but they're in a box. But I'll go back with the old
There you go, 565.
Hemisphere.
Yeah, man.
And that PA system that I had when I was a kid, my older brother still has it, and the only thing that works are those Shure mics. So there you go.
Great, thank you. Rod?
I'm trying to unmute.
There you go.
Rod Evenson. I'm in Milwaukee, Oregon, which, unlike Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is spelled slightly different. It's a suburb of Portland. And I showed you the Shure
There you
Model
go, man.
300.
You got it.
I have quite a few Shure mics. So, been doing audio recording in the area for some years. Started as a hobby. By profession, I'm an electrical engineer, but I'm pretty much retired from that at this point. So I've got a job next week, so I might be dropping by during a break, but we'll see.
Okay, great, thank you. Mac?
Mac Perkins. I'm on Whidbey Island, Washington, which is about 20 miles north of Seattle. Actually, I'm on a SM99 SE, one of the much reviled microphones on a stick, which I've actually had really good luck with on podia.
Yep.
We did a lot of church work with them.
Yep.
Mostly a theater guy, did musical reinforcement for more years than I care to think of. Also theater lighting, that was our main stage, our main business. And now we spun off into a different company and we make museum displays.
Oh, cool.
All right, thanks. Jess, are you there?
Yep. Hi,
all right,
everyone. Nice to meet new folks. I'm Jess Berg. I'm currently located in Bellingham, Washington. Spent some time in LA. Primarily, cut my teeth and up in Minneapolis. Been a live sound engineer for 17 years. Primarily,
Jess,
done some
your
podcast
connection seems to be funky now, and your picture is frozen.
no.
Do you want to just turn off your video and talk to us? That might improve the audio. Sorry to interrupt. No, leave yourself muted, unmuted, and talk, but leave the camera off because you're getting swirlies and stuff too. So you're muted still. Still muted. Still muted. Oh gosh.
Can you unmute her?
No, the host can never unmute. You can only ask them to unmute. You can't unmute somebody. So, Jess, you're still muted, and we want to hear from you, but we'll come back or something. Graham.
Sorry, I got to unmute myself. Forgot about it. Graham Newton. I'm in Toronto, Canada. I'm 78 years young as of last January. I've been involved in audio most of my life. My father tells me I used to lie down in front of the living room radio at 5 years old listening to the late afternoon kiddies shows, which I liked. And I got hooked on the music used in the Lone Ranger radio and TV shows. I wanted to find out where all that stuff came from. My parents sent me for piano lessons when I was about 6 years old. I took 1 year of piano lessons. I hated it. The other kids were out in the street kicking a ball around and having fun, and I had to play scales. I wish the hell I'd continued. But just an aside, myself and a number of other kindred souls finally determined where all of that neat music came from. And one of my partners in crime has actually written a book on it called The Mystery of the Masked Man's Music. And it is fascinating. I have a complete collection of all the 12-inch transcriptions that were used in production of the show, and I plan to transfer, clean them up, and restore the whole thing and make a set of that music available. So that's what's been keeping me busy for a few years.
Wow.
Great.
That's great.
That's cool.
That's really great. And Graham, if you have a costume and wear it to one of these things, that would be awesome. That would be totally awesome.
No, but I've got the mask somewhere.
Good. Okay.
We all do.
Okay. Okay. Next week, everybody wears a mask.
I will.
Okay. Gordon.
I'm Gordon McGregor. I'm in Glasgow in Scotland, UK. How did I get into audio? I went to festivals as a kid because my guardian at the time was a promoter's assistant. Got interested in music, started doing like recording with cassette recorders of things and whatever as you do as a kid. And then gradually went into helping a friend that worked for the BBC. In those days, they took casual labour on to drive and run cables and whatever. Got fascinated by the way the BBC worked. Then got involved in live sound because my missus's bands always sound rubbish. And these days, when I can, I would go out and do live sound and whatever for a friend's small production company in Glasgow here.
Gordon, do you know a friend of mine in the UK named Roger Lindsay? Okay.
Nope, I'm sorry.
That's right. Live sound guy. That's what you know. So okay.
I've never been in the big bad world of live sound, like big massive concerts as such.
Okay.
The nearest we got to that was when Maggie was working for Roland UK as a keyboard support person and playing backing. But in those days, I was acting as her assistant, hauling keyboards about or looking after the kids, depending where we were.
Now, that isn't quite correct because you've shown us places that you've worked with different people.
Yeah, so that was like hauling loudspeakers around for Brit Row and whatever. And by the time we were finished, you weren't talking to. You were too knackered. You were way hiding, looking for somewhere to go to sleep, man. Remember those speakers in those days? We had better part of half a ton.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay. Right.
so you weren't. You were there 4 days before anybody knew anybody that was there going to run them. Like
somebody commented on my Canadian accent. Gordon, I love your Scottish.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yes. Great. Okay. Now Jess is back. She logged off for a bit. Let's see if we can. There we go.
Okay. Hi. Can everybody hear me?
Much better, maybe.
My computer totally crashed, so my apologies. Hi, my name is Berg. I've been a live engineer for 17 years, currently in Bellingham, Washington. Spent time in LA, toured the world, became a tour production manager, came up and cut my teeth in Minneapolis, where I was to production assist large festivals and run music in the parks for Minneapolis, and worked at a jazz club, my home venue. And just been up in going on 2 years now, heading up in the Pacific Northwest. I'm really happy to be here, and just became a member last year. So thanks.
Great. Thanks. That was better. Still marginal, but better. David.
Howdy, David in Brooklyn. You can see a Shure user behind me. I happen not to be one myself, but I've really appreciated the talk and the interplay with all the other members of the group, and I'm looking forward to the next presentation that we get from you, sir.
Great. Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
And which microphones were you involved with?
You said Shep's band.
Yes.
Yeah, I mostly have used Sheps, but also earlier, I worked my way up from biodynamic mics to Sony Electrets, which were screechy and horrible. And then
Other than that, though.
Other than that, they were great. AKG's 451s, and then Neumann KM83s and 84s, and some other models, and then to Schoeps. And I kind of stuck with them since about 1974, occasionally.
Nothing wrong with Schoeps. Nothing wrong with Schoeps, man.
Actually, I wanted to show you, despite my not quite wanting to accept the story that you told, I do want to show you what would have been possibly a commonality between the two companies had such a deal gone through. One moment.
David gave a really great talk about Schoeps, the history of Schoeps and Telefunken a couple of weeks ago. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, this is a logo that Schoeps used for several decades, and if you notice the wavy line,
the sine wave,
right? Yeah. Because their name as a company was Schalltechnik, Dr. Schoeps, and Schalltechnik means sound technology, basically. So this oscilloscope sinusoid was meant to be also the S in Schalltechnik, and this is the T. So
cool.
you use that in the Shure logo as well.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I think the companies would have gotten along if there had been a merger like that. But
I wasn't in the room, David, so I can't say that. But,
nor was I.
All right,
anyway,
thanks.
Thank you.
I'm
Ben.
showing the Shure logo on my mic here. So
there you go.
Yeah, close.
Right. Yeah.
All right, Ben.
Horizontal.
Hi, Ben Melby. I've been in Seattle, Washington here. I've been, I think, in audio about 28 years or so, everything from a tour manager, production manager, to in the world, installs, theater, a little bit of everything. Show and tell wise, the only thing I got a 565 here. However, going back to the conversation earlier.
I saw it in the background, man.
There it is.
That's the short monitors, the short.
Just short guys. Honestly, surprisingly enough.
Show it again.
Oh,
there we go. There we go.
There it is.
Oh, my pile of junk over here. Works great. It just, I need some of the pots are a little scratchy, so I need to clean those. Other than that, no issue. Knock on wood so far.
Wow. Yeah.
We're going to find out who made low noise.
All right,
That's
great.
cool.
Thank you. Bill.
Hanley?
Yes.
I didn't know.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Bill Hanley, and I'm up here in Boston area in Merrimack, Mass. And I've been doing audio since in the 50s. And what am I? 84 pretty soon, the 4th.
All right.
Maybe 120.
Thanks.
And by the way, can I? I'll give you a pitch for Bill's book about the last seat in the house.
Oh, yeah.
Well worth picking up.
Great book.
It's a wonderful book.
Thank you.
That's John Kane's work for 10 years or more.
Yeah. It's
really nicely done.
It really just, it documents so much stuff that I didn't know about, and it's wonderful.
It's like
Absolutely. It's a what, Bill?
Like pulling teeth.
He did a good job, though. He got you to tell a lot.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Been now going through some of the photographs, so I'll be able to show more.
Great.
Good. John.
Right. Well, I met Bill Hanley back in 1968 when I was a theater student in New York and walked into the building that was about to become Fillmore East. And the next thing I knew, I was in the rock and roll sound business. Became chief sound engineer at Fillmore East. Spent a considerable amount of time manufacturing equipment for that industry, manufactured broadcast equipment. Somewhere along the line, learned embedded computer programming, analog circuit designer, and for about the last 15 years, I've mostly dealt with tape recorders, modifying them, upgrading them, doing tape transfers. including for many of the groups that I did live 50 years ago.
So, John, did you see the Bill Graham exhibit that went to a couple of museums?
I actually did not get to see that.
Wow. It was here in Chicago. It was it was really stunning. Really stunning.
I heard it was very good.
It was great. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. And I'll point out that John, Tom, Gary, and I'm forgetting someone else who's on the oral history project now, and me. That was who I was forgetting. And John is the first interview of the new series that we hope to do, and that interview is almost done and ready to be submitted, or soon to be ready. And it's really fun listening to him talk about his career. So you'll get to hear that at some point.
Great.
Rick.
Hi, I'm Rick Chin. I'm in Sammamish, Washington, which is a suburb of Seattle. And I started doing audio-related things in junior high school when I was one of the geeks that ran around with a 16-millimeter projector on a cart. And I have a microphone problem.
Wait, Rick, we cut you. You disappeared there for a second. Oh, there you go.
Talking.
Oh,
There you go.
Yeah,
go through the lineup again.
Yes, please.
And I'm speaking to you through a Shure Dualdyne.
Right. Yeah. KSM8.
And you got to name them as you go.
Does this really need a name?
Yes.
Wow.
Oh, I'm a U87.
Yeah, man.
Good. Good.
Here's a Shep's CMC6.
Yeah.
Shep's Omni on the same preamp. I'm not good on the Shep's numbers because I'm new to them. AKG D24E, AKG D1000.
Oh yeah.
And there's more, but they're not here.
Hey, Rick, was that AKG D24? Is that the Beatles mic on Ed Sullivan?
No, the Beatles mic on Ed Sullivan
was an AKG, right?
Yeah, it's an AKG. It's a D19.
Okay.
Yeah, D24.
And I have one here.
Bill said D24, Rick.
Oh, it might have been. I don't know. I didn't get to SID for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Maybe because they but the D19 is the one you see in all the Beatles pictures in Abbey Road. So here's a D19.
Yeah, but I think the D24 I think was the one I saw in Ed Sullivan because it looked
yeah, I think it was the D20.
Had the round
yeah,
end.
yeah.
These are nice mics.
All right.
Poor man's condenser mic.
Rick, I had a question for you. In a couple of weeks, David and I are going to do a presentation on the MS. I'm remembering you mentioned you had a Neumann SM2. When that show comes up, could we talk you into bringing it out for show and tell?
Yeah, I also have an AKG 422.
Okay. Both are stereo mics. So that's the AKG stereo, I assume. Yes.
Right. It's the mic that replaced the C24.
Okay.
I tried to buy a C24 when I was a dealer, and I managed to amass enough money, and then I put the order in, and about 2 weeks later, I got a call from the rep and says, hey, you know that mic order you put in? Well, we can't fulfill the C24. And I go, what? As I'd been jonesing for one for years, and they said, well, the tooling wore out, so it's out of production. That's it.
Oh,
All right.
jeez.
Kaput.
Thanks,
Sayonara.
thanks, Rick.
Yeah. I also have an SM69.
The tube or the FET?
Tube.
Okay. Yeah, I have the FET, but so be it.
Okay, you guys talk about that in email. You've got each other's email.
Sure. You betcha.
Eric.
And you're saying
Yes.
you're going to do a night talking about MS? And I don't mean multiple sclerosis.
Yeah, that was supposed to be today, and some portion of it will be today, but the full presentation will be on March 6th, I think they said, right?
I bought a pair of Audio Technica 4050s.
No, here we're doing introductions here, Graham. Let's get through this here. Sorry to interrupt you, but we got to stop going sideways at some point.
I want to know about MS.
Okay, let's Janie.
Yeah, Janie Wallach, and when bands used to play live, I used to record them.
Oh.
That's just kind of how it is at this
And where
point.
are you?
I'm in Seattle.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Eric.
Yes, I'm Eric Summers. I'm in Poughkeepsie, New York, just north of New York City. And this is the last year. Today is my birthday. This is the last year when I'll be a young, spry man of 79. By next year, I'll be a crotchety 80-year-old. So prepare for that. You have a year to brace yourself. I came from a background. I was a classical music producer for network television back in the olden days when they actually ran classical music on television in the United States.
Wow.
And I also worked in photography and film, so that and I've always had one foot in the audio pond and one in the video pond, visual pond, in my whole life. And I'm mostly now in New York. When except for this year, when there was no concerts, I would record classical concerts, including avant-garde classical. I mean, I say classical, and I mean not pop, but I also do a lot of avant-garde stuff, which some people would cringe at, but all I do love. There's a certain New York style of avant-garde, which is different than the rest of the world, and I'm into there, and I know all the people and do all that stuff. But any case, I don't have that many Shure. I have a Shure 58. I'm not sure what my ribbon mic is. My own voice sounds better than it does now when I use a ribbon mic, and I don't know. I'm not in my studio, so sometime maybe I'll broadcast from my studio because I have 20 mics, but although for concert recording, I mostly use Sheps and DPA.
Yeah, of course.
But but any case, but there's a lot of things, that work and I use, and I used to teach. I taught in the SUNY State University New York system for 30 years, and also taught other places. So I've done a lot of stuff, and but now I'm sort of semi-retired, but I wish I was making a little more money. If anyone has an opportunity for me, tell me. Fortunately, I've got both inoculations, so hopefully they'll be constant, and I'll be able to go back to the city soon and do things. See my significant other who lives in New York, who we correspond with electronically, but including today, my birthday, we Zoomed. But hopefully
not quite the same.
No.
Well, she gets hers second shot in this week, so then she has to wait 2 weeks.
Good.
Then Ides of March is when I'll be back in New York City. And
Congratulations.
Stuff, so that's good. But anyways, when I do my presentation, at some point I'm going to be doing a presentation on a holography, which isn't related to audio, although there is a version that is. And I suppose that'll be after the MS one, which is okay. I could use a little time, but I just mean that when that comes up, I'll show a picture of the two of us.
Next week would be okay.
Well, next week, no, but I want
other than being a problem.
Mine's going to be pretty technical, so I think the MS, it'd be better to do it at a time when I can start with something pretty technical first before we get into the whole MS stuff.
Okay, next week isn't the MS one. 2 weeks
I
is
thought
the
it was.
MS one. No, it's they said March 6th, I thought.
That is next
Yeah, because Rod's working next weekend. He said.
I thought it is next week. Oh, no,
that's
that's
27th.
27th. Okay, I could do it on the 27th, yeah.
Great, okay.
Okay, very good.
Good.
Oh,
Thank
and
you.
I meant to mention, Michael, when I record, I use a VP88.
Thank you. I was part of the design team for that. I hope you like it.
Oh, I love it.
Thank you.
It's the best stereo mic for recording live music, I think.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
So
Luke, what?
Can I butt in for a second about DPA? They deserve a round of applause for making it to Mars.
Yes, that was a DPA.
Oh, yeah.
Right, yes. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's significant. Have we heard anything from it? Have we heard literal sound?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And I'm
I think
wondering
it's too early.
if they're going to MP3 it.
No,
JJ
Oh, God.
indirectly has
talk
gotten
into
to
it,
Mars.
unfortunately, but we'll,
They were supposedly recording the sound of the descent. So
I think there was
somewhere it's hiding.
Yeah, I think there is some recording. I heard
If
they
it's
were
not
doing
9624, it's not worth anything.
actually, most of the recording is not going to be very dramatic unless there's a volcano eruption or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Right.
The
I don't know. I think hearing the Martian, hearing the Martian quiet would be cool.
That'd be good. Also, wanted to say to Graham that the test I've learned years ago. The test of a true intellectual is that he can listen to the William Tell Overture and not think of the Lone Ranger.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
An old comment in Life magazine.
Okay.
A long time ago.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's good. That's
Okay,
probably-
let's keep going here. Luke.
Okay, we'll keep going because I'm going to take up a lot of time. I'm Luke Pacholski. Like Rod, I'm in Milwaukee. Unlike Rod, I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Professionally, I'm a software developer, but have been into audio in one form or another since I was a kid. And these days, when there's not a pandemic, I host house concerts and do the audio for those and record and things like that, and do other random recordings when I can, and various mixing and mastering and things like that. So Shure Night Show and Tell. I'm currently talking through a 556S. This one's from Evanston, so what, 56 or later?
56, right.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the original cartridge was dead on arrival, and so I just kind of jury-rigged a Unidyne 3 cartridge in there, but thankfully I should have a replacement on the way from Mac, so it'll be interesting to see the difference. Going down the line, have an original, I can't see myself here. Let's go back. Here we go. Original 556.
Nice.
Before the S, you can see it's a little hard to see, but it's definitely larger.
Yeah.
Here, we'll switch to that momentarily. There, you can hear me now. This is actually with some EQ. If I turn off the EQ, it definitely sounds a little bit different.
Yeah.
Like a Beatles concert.
Like a tin can.
Just a bit. I'm going to switch. All right, we should be okay. We should be back on this now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then to go through the line with a few mildly interesting Shures. Here's an SM53 and SM54.
Oh God, yes.
The 53 has a smaller windscreen than the 54, but otherwise they're identical mics. These are actually a bit of a riff on the EV.
Right.
Reducing proximity effect. There's a rear entry, and they're similar to their variable D. Got a 546 here. It was the quote broadcast version of the 545. Got an SM56, which was similar to the 57, but again had the shock mount. This one is a variant of a variant of a variant. We already talked about the 565. Bill used those at Woodstock, and a few people have seen showed them otherwise. There was a 566, which again had the shock mount. It was the broadcast version. There was the PE 566 was the professional entertainer version, which they I think they sold it through music stores and things like that.
Right.
Well, this was a gold PE 566.
Yeah.
So that was.
Show me the bling.
Yeah, so one bit of bling. Got another piece of bling here. We already talked about the 545, and there was the 545S that had the stand mount and the switch. They made that also as gold 545 SG. This one is some sort of custom something or other because unlike the 545S, it's got the shock mount. So I know I mentioned this to Michael years ago, and we couldn't figure out exactly where it may have come from. But unlike the other, unlike the 546 and stuff, these go between quote low impedance and medium impedance, like 38 and 150. This goes between 150 and high impedance, like the actual 545S. And then one final bit of bling, which is not Shure related, but since we're talking about mics, it's a Sony ECM 51.
Ah.
So, is
that the Bob Barker mic?
The Bob Barker, Gene Rayburn. So this is extended like Gene Rayburn, and then you can shorten it up like Bob Barker. This is my my MC mic when I put on concerts. So
I love it.
Oh, and I will say the 545 SG. This is my primary vocal mic with the A2WS windscreen. It's pretty much all of the 545 variants I have sound just about the same, but you gotta go with the gold for your primary mic. So
the gold is real thin. Don't rub it very hard.
Yeah, it's definitely, there are spots where it's rubbing off a bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Luke and Gary and were really into looking into the 30th Street studio at CBS Records. And so when you were talking about, and also other CBS stuff, and so when you're talking about Ben Bauer moving to CBS, that's a real interesting subject.
Yeah.
To us, and what he would have done there, in addition to what
he was way in the quad. Quad
Yeah.
was his thing.
Yeah.
Quadraphony, as he would like to say, and
Cool.
He didn't do much mic work there, but
Yeah.
He invented the SQ process, right?
He did. That's right. That's right.
Which was stolen by Dolby to make the Dolby Surround, I believe.
Yeah.
One remaining comment I guess I'll say is the SM53 and 54. I've seen these in all kinds of videos, like Johnny Cash show and other things. I know that back around the time Wally Heider and Bones Howe claimed that they used them a lot. I haven't used them much. To me, they usually sound a little poopy.
Yeah, they're thin.
Well, these aren't so much thin; they're just kind of lacking any real high end. The one time I used this, I kind of cranked the high end a bit, and then it was a little bit nicer. But otherwise, they just they don't seem to have the clarity that I would expect. But
I am on horns.
And horns. Oh.
Yeah, nice mic on horns. I've got 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah, there's shots of Elvis using it. Sinatra used it in the early 70s as well. But
it's interesting because like you see them on a lot of these old TV shows, and I don't know if it's just whatever chain they were using at the time or what, but it's not. It doesn't sound anything like that. It sounds very bright and things. So I don't know if they were EQing a bunch then, or if it's just something to do with the chain to video or something. But it's like, no, that doesn't. It sounds great on the Johnny Cash show or wherever.
Yeah.
What if it
Probably
was
a
just a
boom mic
prop?
hanging around as well, Luke.
What was that, Gordon?
There's probably a boom mic hanging around as well out of camera shot. It might not always be the sound from the mic in front of the artist.
On the television shows he's talking about.
Yeah, well, like I know don't want to get too far in a tangent here, but I know on the Johnny Cash show they had tons of these on vocals and snare and toms and things, and so they were definitely using them for close mics, and for the most part it sounded really good. But anyway, I haven't had a lot of opportunity to even try these. I usually stick with other mics, but they look cool.
They didn't stay around very long. They were around for about 10-15 years, and that's about it.
Luke, what's the microphone in front of you, and is that the one you're talking live into?
Yeah, this is a 556S, which this one was made in Evanston, so it would have been, I think, like post 56 or so. Like I said, this one, the original cartridge that came in it was dead, and there's the voice coil seems to be broken somewhere, so this is basically useless.
What have you got in it? You've obviously modified it, but it sounds very nice.
Yeah, so this is just a cartridge, Unidyne 3 cartridge from a 545 that I scavenged. It's not pretty. I have no metalworking equipment or skills or anything, so I just cut some wood to make it fit in there. But it works. But yeah, hopefully I'll soon have a somewhat vintage cartridge to go in there, and be interesting to see how it compares.
Sounds nice. Yes.
Yeah. So Gary.
I'm Gary Louie. I'm in Seattle. I've been the recording guy at the University of Washington School of Music for several decades. I'm the secretary of the AES Pacific Northwest section and chair of the Tellers Committee for the AES, and I'm an AES Life member. And my microphone today is the Shure KSM 141.
Oh, I love that mic. I love that mic.
Cardioid mode, running into a Sound Devices Mix Pre 10.2. How's it sound? Does it sound okay?
Yeah, that's a great
Sounds
mic.
all right.
Sounds like
Okay.
You guys are all embarrassing me. I'm talking into a cheap $20 combination camera and microphone that I bought $20 at the local computer trash store.
Perfect. Okay, and I'm Dan Mortensen in Seattle, and I'm happy to be a part of this with you guys. This has been really cool. This is number 36, I'll point out, in the series since the end of May of these meetings. And I theoretically do live sound for concerts and stuff, and until last week, that was theoretical, but I'm hoping to show you in a little while this event that I did for the first time since last February that used speakers and had an audience. So before most of you got here, Michael and I were talking, and he was pointing out that the SM81 is vintage soon, and I hope that comes true, because for a while I was doing some orchestras in the summer outdoors and close miking them, and I bought 22 81s.
Wow.
At that time, and I'm hoping that I'm sitting on a gold mine at some point. So when they become vintage. So
did I miss or forget? Did we miss Tom?
No, Tom, we did. I think.
We did?
I'm sure we did.
Yeah, we did, Tom.
Yeah. Did I miss anybody else? I don't think so. I think I got everybody.
I just say
Yes, back around.
I'm in Evanston, Illinois. Right? That's what you want to know where I'm at. And so
yes.
Yeah.
Jess back around?
Yeah. She came back.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm here.
Hey, now your connection's working.
You know, I switched USB jacks. I just recently changed my setup, and I think one is better than the other.
Sounds good now.
Huh. Yeah, it seems fine now.
It's a blue Yeti.
You had it under too much pressure. There was too much focus on that thing to.
Well, the Zoom was saying her connection was really poor, so I think that was the internet connection.
Yeah, it could be. So let's go to the next thing on our agenda here, which is Rod. It was going to be the MS thing, but we're going to put it off. But Rod wanted to do something today, and I hope it's going to be short, because I want to talk to Rod.
Wait! My wife just told me I have to come to the dinner now, guys. That's
okay.
Thank you.
Unmute your mic. You can't hear.
Anyways,
well, wait to do that. Let's finish up with Michael here, because Michael has to go.
I've got to go but thank you for inviting me. This was great fun, and I learned a great deal, which is also great fun for me too. So please invite me back, and if you have some
every week, every Saturday.
Thank you.
At this time, we're here, but for sure, 3 weeks.
I'm Freddie Green. You got.
Yeah, thank you.
And if you want to email me, it's
I will.
Pederson _Michael@Shure.com. And
Michael, real quickly.
Yes.
I don't know Freddie Green's music at all.
Okay.
Like at all.
Okay.
Could you recommend one or two CDs that are available?
Sure.
For me to get to know.
He played on every Count Basie record. So if you just want to go and get count bassies from 1950, like Chairman of the Board or the Atomic Basie, those are easy to find. Or just go on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and do Count Basie, you'll find because he played with Basie for 50 years.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Anyway,
Great.
thank you.
We'll talk again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. Glad to do it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Okay.
Michael. You're a wealth of
Thank you.
information.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Rod.
Okay. Well, David and I were working on coming up with a talk about mid-side recording technique, and of course, FM radio is broadcast mid-side in terms of FM stereo. So that's one of the points to be made from all of that. And anyway, as I say, it's usually accomplished with a stereo microphone. This is a Neumann SM69, and usually one capsule is run as the mids, as some directional pattern of any possible directional pattern. The sides or S mic is always bidirectional, and then you run it into a matrix. Let's see, do I have share screen? Let me get to that.
Now, are you going to give a whole presentation today, or
No,
what
no.
are you doing? You're going to do it twice?
Well, anyway, the technique is run into what is called a mid-sides matrix that turns it into left-right. And this is one way of doing it. The other way is using a bidirectional mic in combination with some other microphone. And this is a bidirectional capsule from Neumann. And
So that's side address?
it's a side address capsule. And you can put that in combination with a microphone of some other pattern, such as a shotgun. And I think I showed some of this last week. And you have to line up the capsules so that it will decode right into left to right using the matrix system, which can be either electronic or in the early days it was a matrixing transformer. And I'll show you some pictures of that next time, and or in 2 weeks, and how that's wired up.
Okay, good.
What else can I say about it? One of the things you kind of have to worry about with MS, especially when you're using two capsules, is that the left and right, the sources of sound to the left and right must line up perpendicular to the axis of the microphone capsules. In other words, if you're tilted down a little bit, you might have to move one of these forward or backwards a little bit. Otherwise, overtones from instruments to the left and right are going to come out on the wrong side of the microphone. It's a little unsettling to listen to a string quartet and the overtones from the cello on the left, or on the right, I should say, will appear on the left channel. So that's one of the issues that I'll go into a little bit. And I've had direct experience with that. So anyway, that's kind of it from my end. David, do you have any comments that you want to throw in as a preview to that?
No, thanks. I agree with everything you said. And as far as today is concerned, I'm playing hooky.
Okay. Anyway, not to use up any more time, if anyone else has something or any questions, at least for the moment,
I'll try and get hold of my Sennheiser broadcast stuff, which is an 8. I've got the shotgun mount that kind of sits with the shotgun mic and the figure of 8 underneath it, kind of like what you're wanting. I can probably demonstrate the tip it up and down, how the left and right doesn't work when you do that. It took me that caught me by surprise quite badly the first time I ever used one, and I'm like, what's gone wrong here, It took me a little while. It was somebody realised what I was doing wrong and explained to me what was the problem, but it didn't make any sense at the time. What was I, about 19 or 20 the first time I tried to use the thing? Could not work out how I couldn't get it to work properly.
Rod, can you recommend any reading material on MS? Has anybody done a book or anything like that on it?
There are some AES anthologies that I think you can potentially find it in the AES website. If you're a member, of course, you can get into most of their material. So that's one source to look through. Off the top of my head, I first learned about it when I bought the Neumann SM69, and the salesperson says, "Don't you want the matrixing transformers?" And I said, "What is that?" And I said, "Okay." And I got them, and suddenly it became very apparent as to what MS was, and that you had this ability to sort of direct the stereo pickup on it, either narrow it down to mono or open it up to a solid left-right, or if you wanted the left-right, a solid left-right from something at a distance, you could boost the sides mic, which is the bidirectional microphone, and sort of pull something that might be more or less towards the center off to the extreme left or the extreme right. So that was the little surprise that I hadn't known about that before I bought the microphone. So
I wound up making a little MS transformer box out of a couple of Hammond 804 audio transformers. We have a company in Guelph, Ontario called Hammond Manufacturing, and these guys have been making transformers, and really good transformers, going back I think into the 40s and maybe 30s. And they make some really neat little, very high quality audio transformers. And I wound up making a matrix out of them. Yeah, there you go.
I put it up on share screen, and there are the Neumann matrixing transformers. One is labeled left on the right, and the one on the right is labeled left. Yeah. So, but that's the wiring for it. Okay, I'll unshare. I'll stop share. So anyway,
what I was asking about by way of any kind of literature and so on, Cedar, which makes all these specialized audio processes and so on, advocates using something to take the audio, make it MS, diddle it in MS form, and then convert it back into left-right stereo. And I wanted somebody with more knowledge than I have to give me an outline on how that is used and what sort of benefits you could get from it.
We can definitely cover that.
Yeah, all FM radio material is converted to mid-sides before broadcast, regardless of whether it's recorded with a stereo microphone in MS pattern or just a left-right and maybe a big mix. So And part of the advantage of it is that it is the technique tends to be very mono compatible. If you're picking it up in your FM radio in your automobile and it happens to be in mono in that situation, then you won't have some of the ill effects that spaced pair might come up with for some recording circumstances.
Right. Although in the case of FM, there's no audio processing that works on one of those signals and not the other. The audio processing for FM is always done in left-right format.
Yeah. Yes.
At the station. Phase Linear or Carver, I forget which, used to have a processor box that did do separate processing on the side channel, which greatly improved the subjective signal-to-noise ratio of stereo FM broadcasts. So we can talk about that too.
It's this kind of tweaking that I'm interested in, because Cedar has a utility called two-channel tools, and you can put up two iterations of this and then put a process in the middle on one of the MS sides.
I do that all the time.
And do fiddling around with it, and I wanted to get a better idea of the applications and so on.
We'll be very glad to discuss that. I've used not Cedar's version of it, but I do that kind of processing almost all the time when I record with MS. Certainly anytime I record music with MS.
And if you want an example of broadcasting that treats the different signal separately, stereo television has a compander in the difference channel, because otherwise it would never have enough signal to noise ratio.
Well,
back when we had analog stereo television, which of course we don't anymore.
I showed the Neumann matrixing transformer configuration just a moment ago, and of course now all of that is done in my computer with a special plug-in. So I can run it with run the variations quite easily there. So the transformer is not really a big deal anymore, but
and Graham, it's becoming quite common for MS to be used for special effects by messing with different balancing and whatever on the sides and on the center. There's quite a lot of Cedar is one thing, but there's actually quite a number of plugins now that you can get that will allow you to mess with that kind of thing, and it can be quite fun, to do stuff like that. But it can also end up with some truly horrific results if you're not careful with it, really and truly.
Disaster in the making.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and if you happen to be unfortunate enough to print it, you cannot get it back out of it. Believe me.
Well, David and I will probably be going through some of the things we not found it desirable for when we give our presentations. So anyway.
All right. Well, thank you for that preview. We good?
You bet. I am anyway.
All right. Thanks. So the final presentation today is going to be, I did a couple of shows last week, and I thought it would be interesting because a big part of this, are you seeing a picture of the cars?
The truck.
And let's go full screen. Let's see. Did that go full screen?
Yes.
Hooray. Okay. So there were back-to-back events, Wednesday and Thursday, and it's important to get the stuff to the gigs. And this is showing the two trucks You can ignore the one that you can't see back there. On the left is a Kia Soul electric car, and on the right is a 14-foot box truck Ford. The Wednesday one was a recording of a drum line for a video. And the Thursday event was a setup for what I think might be the first well-regulated live event with an audience in Washington during COVID times, I think. I'm not sure of this. But so I'm going to show you. Did that change the picture?
Yeah.
Hooray. This is the truck for Wednesday's event, showing the available space. It's very well planned and organized, of course, and with a safety barrier between the cargo area and the passenger area. Here's the stuff, the entire rig for the gig. That's a couple of mixers, each in a road case on the top there on the right. And on the left is the stage box, and then everything else is in the rolling case down below. So there's those guys in the truck, in the Kia, and there's everything else in the Kia. I couldn't fit my pack back there. I had to keep the pack with the iPads is also a part of this, and that couldn't ride in back. So that was amazing that it fit. Here at the gig is a Behringer X32 producer, which is theoretically 32 inputs and 16 outputs, but there's no scribble strips on it other than manual ones. So every function on the front here is different depending on what you've chosen it to be. So it can be either inputs 1 through 8 and DCAs 1 through 8, or it can be inputs 1 through 16, going clear across with the master always being on the right, and then there's a bunch of EQ up above. And without the electronic scribble strips, it's real hard to keep track of things after input 16. I only use it for little things, and I had, I think, 5 inputs on this thing altogether, so it was not a huge problem to keep track of what was what. The performers were in this gymnasium, which was surprisingly dead. It's real well treated. You clap your hands and there's really nothing that lingers on. And they had a full video crew. The drum line was going to be just beyond the camera lines. There's 9 kids playing drums of some sort. And I put 3 mics on the floor. These are 2 Shure Beta 91s and 1 SM91 in the middle, because I figured the cameras would not want to see some mic stands in the way. So these are a mic that's made to operate on the floor or on a flat surface to improve its response. That's what it looks like close up. And this is a crappy shot of the stage box, which was over on the side. And there's 2 boxes there. One is a spare in this case. And the 5 mics are all plugged into there. There's no output from here because there's no speakers or anything. It connects via a Cat5 cable, a single one, which runs through the door that's just to the left of this picture into the control room. The mixer is just on the other side of this wall. And this is a couple of Audio-Technica 4050s that I put in the back of the room in cardioid pattern to pick up some space. I didn't really get a directive of how they wanted it to sound, but I decided I wanted it to sound big. So I wound up delaying the 4050s. They're about 25 or 30 feet back from the front, and I delayed them another 30 milliseconds to get like a slapback. I figured a rockabilly slapback sort of a thing on the echo would be cool, and it worked out okay, I thought. Just that's what it looks like up in the air in silhouette. Here's the kids out performing, and there's a bunch of they didn't want to set up in a single arc for the video. They wanted to have two lines of kids who are spaced out 6 feet from each other for obvious reasons. And so some people are much farther from the mic than you would think would be appropriate, and some are closer, but this was what it was. And it sounded okay, I think. I think I can play something if you want to hear. Do you want to hear what it sounded like?
Sure.
I'm mixing on headphones, so it's hard to know exactly what it is. So I clicked share sound. Let's see if we can make this play. I don't know that I'm going to be able to make it play. I probably need to source this somehow. They wound up playing it 7 times. Yeah, I don't know how to get this to play. Oh, was that it? Could you hear something?
I heard that.
There we go. Are you hearing that?
Yeah.
Okay, so they did 7 takes of that, and that was the first one, and it got a little better at some point. It's a middle school deal, so the kids are like from, I don't know, 12 or 13 up to, or maybe they're younger than that. And there were some seniors there too. So, I mean, it was cool. So, any questions about that? That's all I have to say about that. Probably not. Okay.
You mentioned your use of Ethernet protocol between your stage boxes and your mixing on a Cat5.
Yes, it's a AES 50 is the proprietary. I guess it's an open source, but it's pretty much only used by Behringer, Clark Technique, and Midas.
AES 50 was just the control protocol.
Okay.
I thought Behringer used a proprietary transmission protocol for the audio.
No. There's AES 67.
No, this is strictly AES 50, and if I misspoke, I'm sure I did, but it's what the stage box uses to communicate to the console and back. And there's 2 versions. There's Super Mac, which is I forget how many bits per second, and HyperMac, which is double that or something. So it's a digital transport.
It was a Sony used AES 50 originally with some of their broadcast discs, and then
this came from the Oxford.
Yeah, and then Clark Technic, well, Midas actually,
Yes,
when they started
bought it.
developing their digital discs, the Pro Series,
Yes,
on.
they use HyperMac, the digital. The Super Mac is at 48K, and the HyperMac is at 96. Yes.
It's quite a reliable system, but nobody else seems to have took it on apart from Clark Technic, Midas, Behringer,
Yeah.
who are all in the one big owners group now these days called Music Group.
Right.
It works. It works fine. It's pretty good. It's a bit fussy.
Yeah, usually you can disrupt it. We found out early on that if you shuffle your feet, if you're using unshielded Cat5 without Ethercon connectors, if you shuffle your feet across a carpet and touch the console so that you've generated static electricity, the static discharge will disrupt the signal flow and cause. I first learned about it when I didn't do the static discharge, but I was doing a festival where I had 5 stages with 7 consoles going. On the setup day, I had a pile of snake underneath a table that had. Are you seeing my hands? Here?
No, just the picture.
Well, let me stop the share here so you can see that. So, you know, a table comes down with legs, and there's a leg across the bottom, so there's a space, and I had a wad of cable on one side of the legs, and I wanted to pull it under it and get it to the other side, and there was a little tangle, nothing horrible, and I wasn't pulling super hard, but the consoles were on, the PA was on, and I'm pulling on it, and all of a sudden the PA goes like that. And I stop pulling, and the noise stops. I start pulling again, and it started again. And Alan Bagley, those of you who know Alan Bagley was there. He was my front of house guy in that room. And we looked at each other, and this is the beginning of the 5-day festival. And go, oh my God, what is this? First use of the consoles in a big situation. And it turned out that what was happening was the Cat5 cables were there's 4 pairs of wire inside each cat cable, so 4 twisted pairs inside, and this particular cable had nothing in between the twisted pairs, and pulling the wire through a small area, and so squeezing and pulling the wire caused an inductive variance in between the pairs, so that one pair had a different distance or something. The inductance changed in there and disrupted the sync, and that made the pink noise. So we didn't do that again over the weekend, and it was fine, but we looked into it a lot, and we wound up having a AES workshop with for our section with Steve Lampin from Belden and Mac here, and Gary's showing, I assume that's Gary, showing a meeting summary. This is on our website, and Steve talked about the development of Ethernet, and Mac, what did you talk about? You talked about how to wire, no, that was
bad things to do with Ethernet.
Yeah. And we had Kurt Denke from Blue Jeans Cable showing us how to wire a Cat connector, Cat5, RJ45 connector. And we spread out a bunch of cables and tried to disrupt the signal to see what we could do. We danced, everybody danced on one cable and caused a problem. Oh yeah, and this was at Cornish's theater, Black Box Theater, and they had the scissor lift there. So we gave a sacrificial Cat5 cable and put it under the wheels of this scissor lift, which weighed 4,500 pounds, I think. And we drove back and forth. We had signal going through it and drove back and forth across it 25 times and made the cable be about a 1/16 or a 32nd of an inch thick by close to 3/4 of an inch wide, and it didn't disrupt the signal at all. The cable could be that distorted and screwed up and still pass signal. And Kurt had a Fluke DTX 1800. I forget the number of it. An analysis meter for CAT signals, for Ethernet signals, and that cable passed the Fluke is either a pass-fail. It measures a whole bunch of parameters and determines if it is meeting the standard, and that cable did. You would not
by
want
much
to.
though.
Yeah, but it's pass-fail.
You could see where it was distorted if you did a TDR on it, which we did.
Okay, I don't remember that part, but it still worked.
I think we were hiding in the corner at that point.
I was going to say, Dan, though, you got to remember that AES-50 isn't actually Ethernet signal. It's a
That's true. That's
altogether.
true, but there's no measurement standard for cable to pass AES-50, so you have to use the.
That particular static problem, though, is a Behringer thing.
Yeah, and they fixed it later. They made it so when that was a problem, it didn't generate the static. It just stopped the signal.
Really? No, I had a friend of mine that recently installed a Behringer console and discovered that he could not coil the cable up in a specific pattern and have it work.
What kind of cable?
It was Cat5 unshielded.
Well, that's the problem. You
Right.
can't use unshielded.
And then do you find that Cat6 works better?
Cat6 has one of the ways that cables meet the Cat6 standard by and large is to put a longitudinal spacer down it so that each pair is within its own little compartment and isolated from the others. And I've not been able to disrupt signal in a Cat6 cable with some trying.
It will still do the static thing. It won't do the distorted thing if you bend the cable around, but it will. So it's a problem with the shielding on the Behringer input and only affects the big X32. It doesn't seem to affect any of the other X32s, the static thing, quite so badly. It just is the way the Ethernet or the Ethernet will say that the Cat5 board is mounted in the desk, and it screens through the shield of the sort of. There's
like the old days of returning pin 1 through the circuit board to the chassis.
Pretty much that's exactly how it works. So you have to have the EtherCon connector on the shield. You've got to make sure it hits.
Well, that's for the electrostatic discharge problem.
And that's probably the problem your man's had.
The twist, the squeezing and pulling was a completely different issue.
Yeah. That's a different deal altogether.
Yeah, a guy named Brian Wynn figured out that if you have shielded cable with EtherCon connectors at both ends, that the console is immune from electrostatic discharge. And he modified, and I did this too, modified a barbecue sparker to give you a reliable spark whenever you wanted one, rather than shuffling your feet all the time. And it's totally reliable. Midas claims that you only need unshielded cable with their consoles, but I know somebody who has had Midas Pro 3, and we disrupted it using unshielded cable. It took more time than the Behringer did, but it was still disruptable. But unshielded or shielded rather was unstoppable.
Do you have a cell phone shielding test for all of this for someone who gets a cell phone?
I've put my cell phone on the console lots of times and never had any problem from either my cell phone or anybody else's.
I'm most of the gear I'm using that's moving audio over IP, they tell me Cat5e or Cat6, and I'm not sure what the issue with Cat5e really is, as to why that's preferred over just plain Cat5. But
well, it's a higher transmission bandwidth on Cat5e by a lot. Cat5 is not 100 I don't know. I don't remember these numbers, but it's something like 100 or 1,000.
Basically, Cat 5e was just a small change. That Cat 5 really ceased to exist long ago. But almost any Cat 5 is Cat 5e.
Yeah.
But it was just a small.
Well, it was a major improvement because it had a much higher bandwidth than Cat 5 did. Cat 5e was a big jump up from Cat 5, as I understood it. But that's not why I came to talk today. So the next...
Dan, what was your
yes.
output to the video people? Were you giving them multi-tracks or just 2 channels?
No. He had a little Zoom type recorder. I don't know what brand it was, with XLR ins, and I ran main output from the console into his recorder and watched the lights to make sure it didn't overload, and that was it.
So you're just giving him 2 channels? Or
Yeah.
mixed down to 2 channels. Okay.
Exactly.
And hopefully he didn't get the left and right mixed up.
Who cares? You know, it's a kids playing drumline. The song lasted 1 minute and 30 seconds or something, and it was part of some dinner that they were having maybe tonight, or virtual, of course. But it was cool. It was fine. So, are you seeing the screen now again of the kids?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a little out of sequence. This is how much snow we had on Saturday, but they said it was going to start on Thursday, which was the day that I was supposed to load into this other thing. And so that added some tension to it, and it fortunately turned out fine. But here's the back of the truck, which is exciting, I think. And here's the stuff in the truck. I took all of these pictures today. I didn't take them then, but you can see it's not a very full truck. It's not a giant gig. But I do get to use the Genie Tower and the homemade line array at this thing. There's the Genie Tower, which weighs about, I don't know, 300 pounds, like that, and it's too tall for my truck, so I have to lay it down and strap it in. And there's the legs for it. So I'm going to start in the small room. This is in a convention center, and they have the performance area, and then they have the awards ceremony. And they previously had the awards ceremony out in the lobby, and I just took one speaker because that covered that other space really well. When I showed up to this, they said, oh yeah, it's not in the lobby, it's down in this other room. So I had exactly one speaker available to use at it, and it covered the room nicely. The interesting thing about this to me is these chairs. This is the audience seating arrangement for this space. So they are all spaced out very far from each other, and there's not a whole lot of seats in this however many 100-seat room this is in a ballroom. And it's really just a single microphone at the podium with a single speaker, so for them to announce who won. And I put a switch on the switched microphone there, and that's the extent of it. And the theme of this is Bumbershoots and rain. It's not called Bumbershoot. That was a separate festival, but you'll see in a minute why this is here, but it's kind of cool looking to see. This is a shot underneath the table of the mighty mixer for the one microphone. I bought 7 of these little Behringer. These are battery powered mixers, and God, they hold up really well. There's nothing to them. It's high and low, and that's it. That's all the EQ, and there's nothing else to it, but all I need is some amplification. And you'll see in a minute that it's whatever. And I actually taped some cable down, so that's awesome. And here's another shot of the room. Now we're upstairs, and this is my homemade line array of UPJ 1Ps. I previously had a Meyer Melody array but sold it, and the Meyer Melodies work great in this room. This room is 200 feet by 200 feet by close to 50 feet tall, 40 feet tall, I would say. And it's concrete floor, concrete walls, metal ceiling, which is exciting.
It's a horrible set of room dimensions.
Yes, yes. It's miraculous in its sound in a lot of ways. And the line array was pretty coherent through the space, and this is reasonably coherent through the space, but I didn't want to get another line array. I wanted to get rid of line arrays. I don't have a use for line array, but I use these speakers a lot and have a bunch of them. So I assembled it and it works okay. They keep hiring me. Anyway, that's all Unistrut on the side there, and I got some grade 8 bolts and lock washers and washers and put them in there. So the bolts are captive, and I color coded them alternating red and blue so that I could be sure that I was getting every speaker attached. The speakers have threaded mounting holes on both ends, symmetrical on both sides, so it works out really well. And this array weighs about 400 and some pounds. Those are 40 pounds a piece, and there's 9 of them. And the Unistrut weighs something, and this is a 20-foot tall Genie, so it has an 800-pound working load, so it's got plenty of stuff. So there it is hanging, and you can see in the back well, let's see. I thought I had a different picture, but behind it, you can just barely see that that's the mixer, and that's a Behringer X32 rack, and there's 2 of them in there. One is a spare. And this goes for 5 days, and it sits here. And this is the room with all the gymnastics stuff there. The audience is on the far side. You can just barely see a black velour fence kind of going around, and everybody's on the far side of that, and their seats are spaced like they were downstairs. And there's a million, well, not a million, there's probably 100 kids at a time on different teams going through and doing all the different exercises or tests or whatever it is, competitions that they're doing. And they each everybody does everything once. So, oh, here's the mixer. And it has a lockout feature. You can press 2 or 3 or 4 buttons in any combination on the front there and create your own little lockout, which anybody who's going to use it has to press the same combination of buttons to get access to the controls. You can access the whole mixer through the 2 knobs and several buttons there if you wanted to. And here's another look at all of the umbrellas. They hang those umbrellas with a couple scissor lifts over time. And there are these floor areas. We're near one on the right here, and there's one on the far side. And each of those areas has 2 UPJs and a little mixer. And they use this chalk on their hands. These are self-powered speakers, so there's a little fan in there. And the first year I discovered that both my mixer and my speakers were completely white instead of being black like I left them. And that's all chalk. So I put these weather covers on the back to keep the chalk out of the guts of the fan and stuff, and it seems to work okay. And here's a mixer that I've prepared for chalk use, where everything is covered except the single fader that they are playing their music through. And they play the same song for 8 hours a day or more. It's more like 12 hours a day. And the kids all have to do that song. So that gets real exciting. And this is volunteers who do this. So I leave this stuff for 5 days and come back, and that's it. And there's a microphone and a playback underneath American flag, basically, where the announcer announces, and that's all that's going through the hanging speakers. And like I said before, this is the first show in a year that I've used speakers for an audience for. And that was the most significant part of that for me, is doing this gig, doing a gig. Mac was giving me a hard time last week about the steepness of my hill, which I shoveled to be able to get out to my gig. So I took out today level, and this is directly in front of my driveway, the 5-degree slope there. And I went up the hill to get the steeper part. This is at the other end of our property going uphill, and that's 4.4 degrees. This is near the sewer, which is 5.8 degrees. And the high is 8.2 up near the stop sign. So that's not very steep. But I was telling you that down the hill is much steeper. You go down this path at the end of the dead end. We live on a dead end. And at the other side of the path, on the steeper, at the beginning of the steep part of the hill, it's 14.7 degrees. And I'm assuming somebody knows how to do percents for hills. I don't, but here's 14.7 degrees. And then about 10 or 20 feet down, it's 14.5. And then 14.8, another 10 or 20 feet down. And then at the steep part of the street, 17 degrees, and then 16 degrees. And then going back up to the path, it's 20.5 degrees. So I don't know if I don't think that's 45 degrees, but it's pretty steep. And I think that's the end of my presentation. It is. So
according to this calculator, 16 degrees is 28.67%.
Really?
That's pretty steep.
Yeah. So when they say 7% grade on the freeway, that's not anything like my street. Well, my house, it's only 5 degrees. So that isn't bad. But yeah, 28% that's a considerable hill. Thank you.
So yeah, 5 degrees is 8.75%.
Huh. So that would be a warning sign on the freeway.
Right. But
yeah, okay.
Since I recently read the code for driveways, they typically allow 12.5% maximum for driveways, at least over here.
All right. You're in the flatlands.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the presentations for today. And amazingly, it's almost 7 o'clock. So
boy,
anything
that's
you
great.
want to, yeah. Anything you want to talk about before we call it a day? That was a killer presentation, wasn't it, from Michael?